please. Chair, are we ready to start item 9 again?
I'm ready. Yeah.
Okay, I've phoned Councillor Rylance and she's back in the meeting. Obviously, Councillor Chamberlain is not.
Yeah.
So if Ed, if you're okay to start your presentation again.
Could we just check we have all the members gathered back in the meeting?
Okay.
Just a quick roll call, please, Wendy.
Yes, okay. Right, so
And
let's
breathe.
start. Yeah. Have we got Councillor Brown?
Yes.
Thank you. Councillor Davey?
Oh, yes.
Yep. Councillor De Sarum?
Present, Wendy.
Thank you. Councillor Key?
Yes, Wendy.
Thank you. Councillor Lawrence?
Here again, Wendy. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Pratt? Do we have Councillor Pratt? Okay,
Yes,
maybe.
sorry.
Oh, thank you. Councillor Rylance? She may be having IT issues. Oh, yes.
Yes, I'm here. I'm back again.
Oh,
sorry.
Brilliant.
I just keep
Thank
dropping
you.
in and out. I'll have to stay off video.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Skinner?
Yes, thanks, Wendy.
Thank you. So all present and correct. Yeah.
Good. And we're definitely quorate, aren't we?
Yes.
Okay. Right. Restarting then. Over to you, Ed. Now it's got to be word for word, mind you. You know, no departing.
Thank you, Chair. Take 2. So this application, hopefully you can see my screen.
Not yet.
Oh.
Can only see you, Ed.
Okie dokie. Let's try that again then.
That's it.
Great. Right. So this application relates to number 6 Railway Terrace Broadcliff Station. So you can see the site on the location plan here. So it's this property here on the end of an existing terrace, which has a paddock and garden area to the eastern side of the property, which forms part of the application site. You can see the site forms part of the hamlet of Broadcliff Station, which is just to the southeast of the railway line, with Lodge Trading Estate to the northern side. And you can just about see the edges of Cranbrook Newtown on the right-hand side of the screen, with the railway station and car park in the top right-hand corner. So just for a bit of context in terms of the policy position, so the site currently lies in the open countryside as far as the adopted local plan is concerned. However, the Cranbrook plan markedly changes that position, bringing the application site both into the built-up area boundary of Broadcliff Station that is proposed as part of the Cranbrook plan, but it also means the site abuts the Blue Haze expansion area of Cranbrook, which is this shaded brown area shown on the plan, which comes directly up to the boundary of the site. And you can see on this plan existing Cranbrook development in here, and the Cranbrook Country Park running through here. So you can see how this site fits into that wider context. The Cranbrook plan has been going through examination for the last couple of years. In the last few weeks, we received a letter from the planning inspector saying that the plan has been found sound and can now be adopted. So there is a report going to Strategic Planning Committee next week, seeking members' recommendation to council that it be adopted. And then it is envisaged to take the document through the next council meeting in October for formal adoption. So given that the plan is at such an advanced stage of production, it can carry significant weight in terms of consideration of this application today. So the application itself relates to the area marked in red on this plan. So you can see the existing property at number 6 highlighted in blue, the application site in red, and as you can see, the existing access is down this private drive, which comes out on Station Road. The application is accompanied with some indicative details. As I say, all matters are reserved, but there are a number of indicative details submitted, including this indicative layout plan, which illustrates how the proposal envisages to demolish an existing single-storey extension on the side of the existing property and erect an additional 2-storey house in its place, connecting into the existing terrace with a run of 3 pairs of semi-detached properties running in line with the existing terrace across the site. There's also some indicative details in terms of drainage details, showing a sustainable drainage system which would accommodate the surface water from the site and ensure that it has a controlled discharge into the mains drainage system in the event of a storm, to ensure runoff levels do not exceed greenfield levels and avoid any flooding issues arising from this development. So if I just talk you through the photographs of the site, you can see the site is divided up by some post and rail fencing into a paddock area with stables and more of a garden area adjacent to the existing house. This is the single-storey extension I mentioned earlier, which is indicated to be demolished. The proposal is, as I say, to build a run of properties across this site. If I move through the photographs, this looks across the adjoining fields, and this is the access. So the access arrangements have caused some concern among the local community and with the parish council. The road, this is the main station road, and you can see the access into the site coming in here. This is looking visibility to the right and then to the left, which the highway authority considered to be acceptable given the relatively low increase in traffic over this access. This is the driveway itself. It is quite narrow, but there are a number of passing places along the length of the driveway which enable vehicles to pass with relatively good intervisibility between those passing bays. So it's considered that while the highway arrangements are a reserved matter, it is clear that this is the only access arrangement into the site, and there is no in principle objection at this stage to that access being used to serve the proposed development. I say, in terms of principle of the development, it's considered that it will very soon fall within the built-up area boundary of Broadcliff Station in the Cranbrook plan, and is considered on that basis to be acceptable development in principle. So there are a number of detailed issues to just pick up on in terms of the development. I know there are some concerns raised by the community in terms of the form and layout of the development. In particular, I think suggestions that the character of the immediate area is that of a terrace, and concerns about the semi-detached units within the development. However, I don't really see that that's harmful to the overall character of the area, which is obviously going to change markedly with the expansion of Cranbrook into this area in any event. So we don't consider that is a grounds to refuse planning permission in this case. In any event, those details are indicative at this stage. In terms of affordable housing, the site falls below the threshold for on-site provision of affordable housing, which sits at 10 units in this location, but a financial contribution is proposed on the basis of a 15% provision of affordable housing that would be required on this site under the Cranbrook plan. So that would take the form of a financial contribution to be made towards provision elsewhere. There are other provisions in the Cranbrook plan which members may not be so familiar with that the site would also need to comply with, which includes providing dwellings that comply with the nationally prescribed space standards, connection to the district heating system, which is proposed to cover in a best endeavours clause within a Section 106 agreement. There are some issues in terms of timing there, in terms of the infrastructure needed to connect into the district heating system and when this site will be delivered. but the provisions of the Cranbrook plan would require a best endeavours clause to connect if that's possible, or an alternative green solution to ensure that the homes are of equal efficiency. You'll see that there's some issues raised in terms of bin storage as well that are raised by a refuse collection team. However, it's believed that there is adequate space along the private access drive to provide a bin store in accordance with the requirements that they state in their comments. An education contribution is also required towards the additional school places that would be needed at primary and at secondary levels. So unlike elsewhere in the district where this would be covered through a contribution under the community infrastructure levy, members will recall that the SIL charging schedule, revised SIL charging schedule, takes Cranbrook and the Cranbrook plan area, including the site, out of SIL. So a contribution has been calculated and would be required through Section 106 agreement. The other issue to just highlight is that of habitats regulations. You'll see in the report an appropriate assessment has been carried out in terms of the impact on the ex-estuary and pebblebed heaths. The conclusion reached is that a financial contribution can be made towards adequate mitigation, which would include towards provision of SANGs, suitable alternative natural green spaces. And you'll see the contribution per dwelling has been calculated on that basis. These figures are calculated on the basis that the cost of mitigation is calculated through the Cranbrook plan. If those figures are slightly unfamiliar to members, those are obviously more up-to-date figures coming through the work done on the Cranbrook plan. And linked to that, another issue is that the development would have to provide biodiversity net gain. So members may be familiar with this as an upcoming requirement through government legislation that formally takes effect next year nationally, but is a provision within the Cranbrook plan which we can implement now. So that's a requirement for 10% biodiversity net gain. So in effect, habitat creation and enhancement through this development rather than a loss, as we often see in the past. Another key provision of the Section 106 agreement would be connection into the Cranbrook developments. So you'll see, so I've gone too fast. You'll see on this plan a link across into the Blue Haze expansion area, which would enable adequate permeability through the site and much better connections and links into the infrastructure and services coming forward in Cranbrook to help to serve this development. So as I say, the proposal is considered to be acceptable in principle in terms of the residential development of this site. Everything else is detailed for reserved matters, but approval subject to Section 106 agreement to include the provisions I've outlined and the conditions detailed in the report is the recommendation. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Ed. We'll hear now from Councillor Rylance, who will then be removed into the waiting room.
Thank you, Chair. Okay. So the first thing to note is that Broadcliffe Station lies within the boundary of Broadcliffe Parish and is therefore covered by the emerging Broadcliffe Neighbourhood Plan. And you will see from the report that the Broadcliffe Neighbourhood Plan Officer had some reservations about this development. I'll not rehash them, they're in the report. Cranbrook itself, in its Blue Haze expansion zone, will be just over the hedge. But Broadcliffe Station is still Broadcliffe Station, it is not Cranbrook. The access lane itself is a private lane, privately owned by the residents and privately maintained by the residents. It's not wide at all. In fact, when you drive down it, weeds touch each side of your car. And it does have a couple of passing places, but I wonder whether it really fulfills the highway's requirement of allowing egress and ingress simultaneously. The station road is described as a quiet country lane. I think it might be better described as a narrow country lane with an urban level of traffic at times. Due to the exit onto the old A30 and due to the hairpin bend over the railway bridge, over the railway, the double hairpin bend at the end of each end of the railway bridge, there are frequently traffic jams caused by traffic to and from the schools, and also HGVs to and from the two sites the other side of the bridge, that can be hundreds of meters long. So to describe it as a quiet country lane, I think is a little bit pushing the boundary. In a wet year, there's a lot of water that collects against the railway line at this point, just slightly beyond where the property is, towards the to the Cranbrook station. And the people who built Cranbrook station will be well aware of this, because they had to put in enormous drainage pipes to channel this water away. It can reach 8 to 10 feet in depth against the railway embankment. So at times there is a lot of water sloshing around, and the access lane itself is sometimes covered with water. It actually has little drainage ditches on each side, and the whole lane will fill with water at times. I think, make your decision, consider the effects on other residents as well. That's all I'm going to say. And I think I'm now going to be put into the waiting room because I cannot take part in this debate. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Rylance. That is indeed the case. Councillor Rylance has disappeared. So thank you, Lucy. You've put your camera on. If you can pretty much repeat what you said earlier for the public record, that would be great. Thank you.
Well, good morning again, Chair, and all other members of the Planning Committee. Our client's application that's before you this morning is for an outline planning application for the erection of 7 dwellings on land to the east of her existing dwelling, 6 Railway Terrace at Broadcliff Station. The application seeks outline permission with all matters reserved for future consideration. The site adjoins the western boundary of the Blue Haze development allocation that forms part of the wider Cranbrook plan. The site sits within the proposed built-up area boundary of Broadcliff Station, where the principle of development is acceptable. Geographically, the site is close to the Cranbrook railway station, and with the proposed development of all the land surrounding the current application site, it would be possible for links to be made between these sites in the future, allowing for easy access to the railway station and Cranbrook town facilities and services. A transport assessment, ecology surveys and a drainage strategy were submitted as supporting information to accompany the application. A professional review of the boundary trees and percolation tests have also been carried out. The findings of these reports support your officer's recommendation for the approval of the proposed development. Via a Section 106 agreement, the proposed development will provide contributions toward the off-site provision of affordable housing, as well as financial contributions toward Category 1, 2, 3 and 4 infrastructure projects, off-site contributions towards SANGS delivery, and will also secure biodiversity net gain, fabric first building measures and connection to the district heating system, or in the event that this is not possible, a package of on-site renewable measures. Your officer has prepared a thorough and balanced report regarding the proposed development, which explains in great detail the reasons that the application has been recommended for approval. I would therefore like to ask that members resolve to grant approval for this small-scale, policy-compliant development, subject to the signing of a Section 106 agreement, in accordance with the officer's report and recommendation. Thank you for letting me address the Planning Committee again this morning.
Thank you very much, Lucy. That was perfect. Okay, we'll go into committee now. I don't think there's anybody from outside committee, is there? Vice Chair, Councillor Skinner.
Thank you. And I've looked into this quite considerably, looking at the sites and where it is. And I think Mr. Freeman has just about laid it out very well. I take on the points that Councillor Rylance spoke, and I thank Councillor Rylance for speaking, because I think it's really important the ward member does have her part. I know she struggled with that a little bit, but thank goodness she got her view in, and so it should be heard, and then we are able to make our decisions on all of the information that comes before us, so we can make our own minds up about what we think about that. And I've made my mind up about this. Listening to Ed, listening to the recommendations, I'm going to actually support recommending the approval recommendation with a subject to the 106 legal agreement. And I just put a little bit of meat onto the bone. It doesn't make any sense not to support it. It's going to fit within our plan anyway. One or two of the issues that came up that Councillor Rylance, which I think needs addressing, were about the road and the width of the road and one thing and another. That's what you get when you're in the countryside. This is morphed on to being a place that is coming very close to the new town of Cranbrook, and I will respect Councillor Ryan's position is saying this is still Broadcliffe. She very much respects her views of where her area is, and that's absolutely right, and so she should do, and she should always battle that one out because it's right and proper. And as far as I can see, the recommendations have been put forward, work very well within the reserve matters, what is coming forward. I will say that as far as the highways is concerned, from my view, there was a highways report. It went to the highways agency, and from what Mr. Freeman said, the highways had no objection to this application. And while I know that area really quite well, I've been down there for many, many times. I'm sure many of you others as well, members will also know this area quite well. I don't see a problem with that. And in fact, actually, you could go as far as to say that as the site starts to mitigate itself and coming together, that as the road will go on, actually, that there will be an improvement in going that way and going through and cutting through to the what would be the potential developments coming forward. So I see no grounds for refusal on this application, and I'm very much in support of going along with the recommendation that the officers have put in, and within that recommendation is approved subject to a section 1006 legal agreement, and obviously that has to be signed, and that will be backed up with the way this is going. So Chair, I'm going to support the recommendation of approval, and according to my little notes that I've got here from myself that Wendy sent over, I then have to, Vice Chair, to immediately ask for a seconder.
Happy to second.
I'll second.
I don't know who came first. Who came first, Chair?
I think it was Councillor De Sarum, actually.
Okay. Thank you. That's enough for
Councillor Key, can I just point out you're not on mute at the moment? Okay, thank you, Councillor Skinner. So we've got a proposal and a seconder. Councillor De Sarum, would you like to speak as seconder then?
I think Councillor Skinner has stated very positive points for this plan, and I think Councillor Ryan has also put forward the ward members' points in a very succinct manner, and I think it's got a couple of very positive points. One, there is policy support, as we heard earlier this morning. There is policy support for it, which will give significant weight. The site will join a residential-led development. We will be in line with an existing terrace. There will be a biodiversity net gain rather than a loss. And as the applicant agent said, it's really a small-scale development which is fully policy compliant. So I think the fact that it's policy compliant, and we heard Ed touch on that this morning, is one of the very good reasons why we should most definitely support it. I do have concerns which will be hopefully dealt with in the reserve matters about the bin storage, because clearly the on page 39 it said, I am not too pleased with the layout of the houses, and I think that that's something we need to address at the reserve matter to make sure that will be fully dealt with. And I think it's very pleasing on page 55 to see that there'll be electric chargers put in. So I think all in all, this is a very good proposal, and I'm happy to support what Councillor Skinner has put forward. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor De Sarum. Councillor Key.
Thank you, Chair. The only thing I've got to actually sort of say is that the two things that concerned me was the flooding of that area. Now, this is the thing is this is a private lane anyway, and I would assume that the houses that are there already must have to cope with this if there is a problem. The other thing that concerned me was the access onto the road. This is being dealt with the highways, and looking at it when on the picture that Mr. Freeman showed us, really it just needs sort of like keeping the verges trimmed a little bit so that one can see that little bit extra. But apart from that, no, I'm full supportive of the approval. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Key. Councillor Lawrence, I think you're the neighbouring ward, aren't you?
I am, Chair. Yes, absolutely right. Yeah, I can't see anything wrong with this. The only thing the only reservation I do have, and I don't know how we get around it, is the fact that when, and eventually this will be joined up to the Cranbrook site, obviously through a much better road than the lane, I wouldn't like to see the lane being used as a cut through from Cranbrook through to Broadclist or Columpton or whatever. And I just wonder whether in the reserve matters, whether something can be put into to make that clear that it eventually, I mean, it might even be that the lane falls into disuse altogether. But I would just like the officers to look at that subject, but I have no objection to the rest of it. And I think Councillor Skinner did a very good job in summing it up. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Lawrence. Ed, do you want to come back on that? Because was there a proposal for a vehicular access through to the Blue Haze area? Or was it only pedestrian and cycle? I'm not sure.
I think the indicative plans, Chair, show a pedestrian and cycle link. I think we were looking through the Section 106 agreement to achieve a vehicular access as well. But the lane that serves the existing dwellings there is a private drive, so it could never form a through route, as it were. And I'm pretty sure from memory that the layout of the Cranbrook expansion area also includes what would be better accesses out onto Broadclist Station Road through that area. So I don't think it would actually turn into any kind of more desirable route in any event. But the fact that it's a private drive would preclude that anyway. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Ed. And just a couple of queries. The indicative layout, it is just that, isn't it? The rest would come under reserved matters. And also the connection to the district heating network, that would come under reserved matters, and the cycle and walking access, those would also be dealt with at the reserved matter stage. I just want to make sure that we don't approve anything today that we then find at reserved matters, oh, well, actually, that's been decided. I sort of remember this in one or two other applications where we were told, well, you can't change that now.
No, Chair, all matters are reserved. So the details, the layout details are purely indicative at this stage. But there are details such as the connections of the district heating system that you mentioned that we need to secure through Section 106 agreement at this stage. So those aren't so much details that would be picked up at reserve matters. Those are principles we need to establish now as part of the Section 106 agreement. And then we can await the reserve matters application with the detailed design and layout, etc.
Good, that's fine. Yes, I always find it ironic, and I mentioned this yesterday, that we attempt to build these sustainable communities such as Cranbrook, and yet the first thing we hear about whenever a new development is proposed about the amount of traffic it's going to add. So how we ever get round this one, I do not know. But we know from experience that probably is what happens. I'm a bit concerned about the arrangements for waste management, because I can see cars going up and down the road having to take the bins, but perhaps that'll only be once a week, so not a major issue. Okay, we have no more speakers, so we'll go to a vote, which I think in planning we usually do by roll call, don't we?
Yes, Chair, if you'd like me to take members through.
Yes, please.
Members, you have a motion to recommend approval, subject to a Section 106 agreement and with the conditions as set out in the report. When your name is called, please would you indicate whether you support the motion to recommend approval, whether you're against the motion to recommend approval, or whether you're abstaining from the vote. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Brown.
Support approval.
Councillor Davey.
Support approval.
Councillor De Sarum.
Support approval with conditions.
Councillor Key.
Approve.
Councillor Lawrence.
Support approval.
Councillor Pratt.
Support approval.
Councillor Skinner.
Support approval.
Thank you. That's recommended for approval.
Thank you very much. That's passed unanimously, so thank you very much. And thank you everybody for your contributions, including the public speaker. And we can welcome the Vice Chair today, Councillor Chamberlain, and Councillor Skinner and I will immediately be demoted.
You will remain Vice Chair though, Councillor Davey.
Yeah, still a demotion. I'm not unaware of that.
Thank you very much, Councillor Davey. I now believe that we move on to agenda item 11, application number 220270 full. This is Southwood Farm, Cotley, pages 77 to 86. I would like to welcome to the meeting the agent, George Whitaker. Is the agent here?
Yes, he is.
That's brilliant, thank you. So first of all, we'll go over to Ed to present his report, please.
Thank you, Chair. Hopefully you can see my screen. Okay. So this application relates to Southwood Farm at Cotley, which you can see on the plan here, lies just to the north of Cotley Village and to the northeast of Monkton Village. So this is an application for creation of a wildlife pond on the farm. The site of the pond lies to the south of Grade 2 star listed building. However, its low level form and separation from that building means that it wouldn't have a significant impact on its setting, while an archaeological investigation has demonstrated that there would be no impact on archaeological interests. The only real issue with this application is that of ecological impact, because the proposal is to effectively excavate and enlarge an existing seasonal pond, which fills with water on a seasonal basis and has the potential to accommodate or form a habitat for species, and there is a concern that that has not been assessed in terms of a survey to understand the ecological impact of those works on any habitat that already exists on the site, appreciating that the work is intended to create in itself a wildlife pond and indeed enhance biodiversity. We unfortunately don't understand what habitats already exist in that location and what impact this might have on them. So you'll see that the report refers to advice from Natural England that we believe we're following in terms of requiring a survey, and also advice from our own district ecologist saying that the application must be supported by an ecological impact assessment. We have requested that information and initially did not receive a response. I now understand from the agent, who I think is about to speak, that a survey has subsequently been carried out, but has not been written up or submitted to us. He did submit last night to us a brief letter from the ecologist who's undertaken that work, confirming that he does not consider that there would be a detrimental impact on habitats as a result of those works, but we don't have the full survey. That hasn't been independently assessed by our own district ecologist, so I'm still not in a position to say that this development is acceptable in terms of its impact on biodiversity. So as a result, the recommendation for refusal at this stage has to stand, I'm afraid. This is also partly on the principle that we've worked to for many years of considering the information that's before you on the day as a committee, rather than relying on information that has not to date been provided, albeit it may be that that's in the pipeline. So the recommendation remains one of refusal on the basis that the proposal would involve development in a location where Natural England standing advice indicates that an ecologist survey should be provided to inform planning decision making. Works would destroy a seasonal pond and replace it with a permanent larger pond, which is likely to have different characteristics and potentially destroy an existing habitat. In the absence of an ecologist's report, it's considered to have significant harmful impacts on potentially on protected species, and is contrary to strategy 47 and policy EN5 of the East Devon local plan. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Ed. And now we'll move over to the agent to speak. George Whitaker, you have 3 minutes to speak and you will be advised when you have 30 seconds remaining.
Morning all, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Great. Yeah, thank you, Ed. That was useful. I think the only controversial thing about this one is the fact that we haven't produced an ecological impact assessment in time. The ecologists went to site last Friday and haven't been able to produce their report in time, but have, as Ed mentioned, produced a letter that came through to me last night, which says, through creation of extensive and varied aquatic and marginal habitat, it's considered that the proposed wildlife pond will have a significant positive biodiversity impact through creation of a habitat suitable for the aquatic life phases of amphibians and invertebrates, potential breeding habitat for amphibians, including protected species, and foraging habitat for bats and birds. There are a few mitigation measures in there as well, and they didn't find any protected species on site. I think it's important just to keep in mind with this one that the sole intention of digging this pond and the development is for better biodiversity. So from what I've seen that's been published, I can't see that there are any other controversial issues. I think it's just the ecology, and the report should be here next week. So my request would be that hopefully the committee could resolve to give Mr. Freeman delegated authority in consultation with the chair of the planning authority to approve the application after the committee meeting upon receipt of an acceptable ecological survey, which should be here next week. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We now move over to the committee ward members. First, I have Councillor Brown to speak, please.
Thank you. This report states that this proposed pond is not considered to affect the listed building or its setting, and there is no impact on archaeological interests and no concerns from the tree officer. East Devon Cabinet voted unanimously in September 2020, and it was reported on the BBC on the 1st of October that they would support rewilding plans in East Devon as part of the climate change strategy and implement nature recovery corridors. This application does exactly that. I therefore recommend it for approval. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Brown. We now move over to Councillor Key, please.
Thank you very much.
I think Councillor Key has a helper there.
Sorry about that. It was the dog barking. Right. Yes. What I would like to don't shout. What I would like to say is, in actual fact, is would it be preferential to actually defer this recommendation so that it would give chance then for the report to come in from the that is necessary, because I mean there is no problem as being sort of briefly said by the agent, and therefore I just wonder whether it would be I mean I'm happy to go for approval with the recommendation that goes with with the officer and also the chairman. I think also the ward members should be included as well in that. So, but anyway, yes, I'm more than happy to support the application for approval with those conditions. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Key. Is that a proposal?
Yes, I thought Councillor Brown had proposed it for approval.
I proposed it, and I will go along with David's recommendations for the extra little bits to be put in.
So, Councillor Brown, you've proposed, and then Councillor Key, you've seconded.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
May I just for clarification then? Sorry, excuse me, I just need to. So, members Key and Brown are proposing to recommend approval subject to an appropriate acceptance of an appropriate ecological assessment in consultation with the chair and board member and the
officer
head and Ed.
Yes.
Effect.
Yeah.
Yes, that's correct.
That's what you're
proposing. Correct.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you very much. I just have some more people to speak, so I'm going to go to them next. So first of all, I have Councillor Skinner to speak, please.
Well, I'm really pleased that the both the ward members have made that recommendation, because I was going to make one or two choices. It was either going to be that one or we defer it. And I think the only thing, well, there's nothing wrong here. In fact, I was thinking of building a lake. Actually, I wasn't even going to ask the planning authority. I was just going to dig it, Ed. Obviously, I probably don't need to do that. I was just, if I want to build a lake, I'll build a lake, and we'll put fish in it and things like that, and trees and all these sorts of things. I don't think anybody would be against it. Anyway, obviously, you've got to do something here. So this is a really good application, and I absolutely understand why the planning officers have said what they've said. I actually look, and if I might, through you, Chair, if you look at the target date, I was looking at the target dates earlier because I was looking at the one for the previous application. It says 21/4/22. That's the 21st of April in my recommendation of this month. I'm just wondering why the ecological report wasn't sort of put in here before. Perhaps, I don't know, Ed, whatever, through you, Chair, whether that should have been done or not. But it would have been, I would have thought, if you were making a planning application and there was already an existing pond, an ecological report would have been standard process. But anyway, whatever it is, I'm quite happy to go along with the recommendation that the two board members have put in, and I shall be very much supporting it. But I just sort of wondered why we got to this place, really. It sounds to me like, had you had the report, Ed, then that would have been done and this would have been approved and probably not even have to come here. But anyway, there we jolly well go. I'll leave it to that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Skinner. Next, I have to speak Councillor Lawrence, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I just briefly, I thought along the same lines as Councillor Skinner, that if the target date was the 21st of April, we've now had, nearly 5 months since then, and why wasn't the report forthcoming? And I don't like going against officers' opinion, and the problem with this is that the officers are absolutely right. Without that report, the ecological report, then there's no way that we can grant planning permission. So I just think that I find it difficult, because I don't want Ed to think that his officer's report is wrong, because in my eyes it's absolutely right. The people need planning permission and they haven't done it the right way. But having said that, it is such a small thing. I go along with the proposal and the seconder. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Lawrence. Next, we move over to Councillor Rylance, please.
Thank you, Chair. So I don't really like the idea of bulldozers and diggers squishing newts and whatever else might be at the bottom of this pond. So would it be acceptable to the planning department if the applicant were to build their pond alongside the existing pond, obviously without driving through the existing pond or damaging it, and then just allow any wildlife that might be there to migrate to and from freely, but of its own accord? Would that be an acceptable solution? Because it just seems like a bit of a no-brainer. We don't want to squish newts and we don't want to reduce the habitat. So why couldn't the applicant do that instead?
Thank you, Councillor Rylance. Ed, do you want to come back on any of those points?
Thank you, Chair. Well, just on the last point, really, I mean, you made note that our own district ecologist in the second paragraph of his comments makes the same point. He says seasonal ponds are a valuable biodiversity feature. The applicant should consider providing a separate permanent pond in addition to the existing seasonal pond rather than replacing the existing pond, which may be a valuable biodiversity feature. Having said that, I don't think we could insist on that if we have an ecological report that proves that we're not disturbing or losing significant habitat through the proposal as it stands. So my point is we don't have that information. It may be that the report that's being prepared addresses those concerns, but I don't know that it will. Sometimes these ecological reports require further survey work to be carried out, which can take months if there's particular habitats that can only be surveyed at particular times. So I'm not precious about it. If the motion is to delegate authority, then I'm sure we can, one way or another, ensure that no significant habitat is lost through these works. But I think the principle remains: we need to have that ecological assessment before permission is granted. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Ed. Next, I have Councillor Ollie Davey to speak, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, yeah, I mean, it's interesting, isn't it? You'd think building a pond was the most biodiverse thing you could do, and then you suddenly find that actually it results in the destruction of what may be an even more sensitive resource. I can understand why the applicant might want to put the pond there, because probably it forms a natural catchment area, and they can rely on it not drying out, as my pond and my allotment tends to do in this hot summer. But I think because we've delegated a lot of our decisions to officers anyway, I am quite happy to go along with the recommendation that our senior officers approve this on the receipt of an acceptable report, and that's scanned by our own ecologist to make sure that it is actually acceptable and has been carried out the due process. Yeah, with that in mind, I think that it should be acceptable, and has been suggested, perhaps our ecologist could also make some suggestions about ways you could treat the margins so the margins actually become seasonal, because these ponds will still tend to dry out a bit in the summer, so it might be possible to put in good marginal planting that retains that element of the seasonal pond.
Thank you very much, Councillor Davey. So we have a proposal from Councillor Brown and seconded by Councillor Key. I will go over to Mrs. Shaw, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yes. Councillor Brown and Councillor Key, could I please, as there has been mention of mitigation that may be coming through from the ecology survey, can I ask if you would be minded to also delegate imposition of conditions, should, in consultation with the chair and ward member as well?
Absolutely, from my point of view.
And Councillor Brown?
Yes, yeah, fine.
Thank you. Therefore, members, you have the recommendation to delegate authority to approve to the officers, chair and ward member, subject to receipt of an acceptable ecological survey and delegation of imposition of conditions to that approval. Please, when your name is called, would you indicate whether you're in support of the motion to recommend approval, whether you're against the motion to recommend approval, or whether you're abstaining from the vote?
Councillor Brown.
Support the recommendation.
Councillor Chamberlain.
Support the recommendation.
Councillor Davey.
Support approval.
Councillor De Saran.
In support of approval.
Councillor Key.
Support approval. Sorry.
Councillor Lawrence.
Support approval.
Councillor Pratt.
Support approval.
Councillor Rylance.
Support approval.
Councillor Skinner.
Support approval.
That's unanimous in support, so that's recommended for approval.
Thank you very much, Wendy. Next, we move on to agenda item 13, application number 220158, full application, the Yard Mobile Home, Clapper and Tail Farm, Escott Park, Ottery St Mary, pages 94 to 102. I'd like to welcome the ward member, Councillor Faithful, to the meeting. Just check that he's in the meeting. He is indeed in the meeting, lovely. First of all, I will go over to Ed to present his report, please.
Thank you, Chair. So yes, this application relates to Clapper and Tail Farm at Escott Park, and you can see on the plan, for those that don't know, the site is here, the main Escott Park site over here. So you can see the mobile home that forms part of this application is this area here. It lies adjacent to a group of agricultural buildings, basically abutting one here to the east, and then there's a larger group of buildings to the south with a yard to the west of the mobile home. If I slightly clearer plan here, you can see the mobile home again here, and there is quite good screening vegetation, certainly around the boundaries of the site. There's some elevations of the mobile home itself, but I'm sure we all know what a mobile home looks like. So I will flick through to the photographs. So you can see the mobile home here in light green, and this is the yard. And this is probably the best image looking across the yard towards the mobile home. The issue fundamentally with this application is that this is a new dwelling in the countryside. We understand it has been there for some time. We understand it's been occupied since 2014. But the site is located outside of any built-up area boundary, is in the open countryside where we would usually only permit dwellings where they are needed to support a rural enterprise as an agricultural workers dwelling or rural workers dwelling. While we understand that the occupant does help out on the Escott estate, we are not aware of any justification that there's a functional need for this worker to live on site. And we're not aware of any personal circumstances that would justify a departure from policy. The site is remote from services and facilities, so any sort of services and facilities needed for daily living at the site would need to be accessed by private motor vehicle. Fundamentally, we don't consider that to be sustainable under our policies, and hence policies seek to restrict development like this in the open countryside. I know the Town Council and Ward members have supported this application and suggest that the personal circumstances of the applicant should lead to a permission, either temporary or on a personal basis. But we don't consider, having reviewed the legislation, that the circumstances are such that a temporary or personal consent would be appropriate. I say there are no circumstances that would outweigh the provisions of the development plan in this case. There is also an issue of consistency here, and for members' information, we have had a spate of mobile homes turning up in countryside locations in recent years, which are many of which are being pursued through enforcement action at the moment. And I would highlight one up at Uplyme, which we successfully prosecuted the occupant for in breach of an enforcement notice that had been served on them last year, I think it was, requiring them to cease the unauthorised occupation of the mobile home, which was as part of an agricultural yard up in Uplyme. So there is an issue of consistency, I think, here with that case and a number of other cases that we are pursuing enforcement action at the moment, where we have people living in mobile homes in farmyards or in the countryside without a functional need for them to do so that complies with our policies and the legislation. So the recommendation is to refuse on the basis that the site is in the open countryside, outside of any built-up area boundary, and in an unsustainable location where occupants will be entirely reliant on private transport for the majority of their journeys. And we would recommend refusal on that basis. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Ed. We'll now move over to the ward member, Councillor Peter Faithful, please.
Thank you, Chair. Having been over and seen the site with Councillor Pratt, looking at the last photograph, what we're looking at is a very expensive sawmill, which is part of what he does on the site. It's a lot of the woodwork. It is, whether you call it a part-time role, but he was concerned about the security of his equipment on that site, which is one thing that he was there for. There was suggestion that he'd been there for a longer. The actual piece of land that the mobile home is located on, the very strip, was outside his original plot. He had a plot which covered the rest of the yard. I don't know if it's possible to go back to the plan showing the different pieces of land, but he was had the land. The original site he suggested continued further south to include other. Yeah, that's so. If you see the line to the left of the mobile home, which excludes the mobile home and runs down to the bottom right-hand corner, that is all the yard to the left of that is where he used to be, but it extended down to the next section of yard and the buildings immediately south of the actual plot we're looking at. I've not seen anything to show that he was or he wasn't, but that's what he has suggested. But the actual specific part that his mobile home is located on he believed it was outside of the original site he was on, so before 2014. I don't know how that works with the length of time he was on there, but I've not seen anything to show that he was. I've not seen any evidence that what he said is true, but it's just his word on that. Otherwise, I can only feel neutral and just trying to give information. Whether you consider the sawmill is a justified grounds for employment on the site, I don't really know. I think it's his own sawmill, but I'll leave it with the committee to take that further. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Faithful. Next, we'll move over to the committee ward member, which is Councillor Jeff Pratt, please.
Thank you, Chair. The situation regarding, I wonder, before I start, Ed, would you be kind enough to put that plan up on the screen? It would be helpful, please. There was the other plan, which was, I think, a bit more clearer. That's right, thank you. The applicant, as far as we're aware, occupied the yard at the farm since about 2012. His mobile home was originally located close to the 4 dilapidated barns, which you see on that plan to the, well, it's the south, it's the other way around from the other plan, but there's some buildings there which were dilapidated barns, which have now been renovated to provide 4 self-contained offices. As a result of this development, while this work for the offices was being carried out, Mr. Morgan was asked by the estate to move to his present location, which is located there on the left-hand side, coloured in blue. He is in his present location, I believe, since 2014. He has a rolling rent agreement with the estate, and you'll probably have seen on the planning portal a letter on the planning file from Sir John Michael Kennaway, dated the 30th of July 2020, confirming and supporting this application. Mr. Morgan's main occupation in the past has been in forestry. He has been involved in many projects at the Scott Estate, in particular, the restoration of a water wheel, which was built in 1868 to ground corn, but which was abandoned in 1936. The Tail Valley Trust gave grants to restore in 2019, and Mr. Morgan played an active part in that project, to such an extent that you'll see on the Escott website, particular thanks to Mr. Morgan for researching, planning, managing, and himself carrying out the timber felling and wheel restoration work himself. The felling of trees is, of course, something which he is well into from his past experience in forestry. Also, you'll see at the back of the barn, at the back of the mobile phone, a very large building, which is an old barn, which has also been renovated by Mr. Morgan. Here again, he felled a lot of trees on the estate and provided these trees to be converted into beams for the roof of the barn. And that barn now is used by the Beautiful Days Music Festival team for storage of their equipment and for meetings. He also carries out work cleaning the ditches and leats on the estate. I appreciate that there are a number of policies which are against this application, but in particular, there is one possibility which members might consider would get him out of this situation regarding these policies, and that is policy H4, dwellings for persons employed in rural businesses. Now, he hasn't got a contract with the estate, but he works there for the estate from time to time, as and when needed. But he does, in fact, in my view, he does, in fact, in my view, comply with the conditions in H4, and I think members should give that consideration. There are no objections to this application, and in my view, no harm caused by the mobile home. The mobile home is out of sight and does not overlook any other dwellings. So on that basis, I would like to propose that the support for this application, and also to reject the recommendation for refusal. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Pratt. So we have a recommendation for approval from Councillor Pratt. Do we have any seconders, or would the committee like to speak? So we don't have any seconders at the moment, Councillor Pratt, so I'm going to move over to the committee members now to speak. First of all, on the list, I have Councillor Eleanor Rylance, please.
Thank you, Chair. So actually, I have a question for Mr. Freeman. I seem to remember that in possibly sometime in the summer, in maybe the June meeting, we had a meeting where we had two planning applications for dwellings outside of the built-up area, but on the edge of hamlets. And I can't remember where we got to with those. It just seems to me that there's two law. There's the planning law on one side, but there's also sort of natural, moral law intervening. And this person does appear to be engaged in agricultural work. And I'm just wondering why his case isn't being considered in the same light as the other two cases that we heard in the June meeting. which was, I think, probably in one case, as far as I remember, was to defer pending a site visit. And I can't remember what the result was on the other one. So I'm just wondering, is there a difference of treatment between this case and the one that we heard of? I think it was somewhere in Dunk as well, sometime in the summer. I don't know if anybody else can remember which. I know we've got a couple of ward members from that neck of the woods. Can you remember which site it was and what the outcome was?
It was in Ullerscombe, if you're talking about the agricultural workers unit.
Yeah. Okay, so what was the result on that? Can you remember, Councillor? Sorry, through you, Chair. What was the result on that?
The result was it was approved.
Right. So then my question then to Mr. Freeman is: are we considering that application and this application in a different light?
Through you,
Thanks.
Chair, I don't believe we are. I mean, I wasn't at the June meeting, but just looking at the notes of the meeting, it looks like members did a site inspection of that one to assess the impact of the proposal on the area of outstanding natural beauty and to consider other siting options. It looks like there was considered to be a functional need for an agricultural workers dwelling in that instance. In this particular case, we've been given very little information up until literally today. I think Councillor Pratt's provided more information than we had beforehand, and I understand we've received a letter from the applicant today outlining much of what Councillor Pratt has just detailed in terms of the activities that he undertakes, or that the applicant undertakes on the holding. But I still don't, it's still not enough information to my mind to say that there is an essential need for him as an agricultural worker to live on the site. He may well do work at the site in relation to forestry activities there, but that in itself doesn't justify a dwelling. There needs to be an essential functional need for him to live on the site. I think mention was made about security, but I would highlight that we do not usually accept security as a reason, even when animals are involved in terms of a functional need, because security can be overcome through technology in terms of lighting systems, cameras, and other technological systems. So really, for the most part, the functional needs often relate to where you've got enterprises, where you've got lambing taking place and things like that for animal welfare reasons largely. Forestry workers can be included, but again, there needs to be a functional reason for them to need to live on the site. The other issue to flag up is that obviously if you accept that there is a functional need, and I say, I don't think we've got anything like the level of information we would need to reach that conclusion. But if you were to reach that conclusion, then this is a temporary dwelling that under our policies would normally be permitted for a period of up to 3 years to establish the holding and the operation, after which a permanent dwelling could come forward on the site. So we need to be very careful in terms of how we consider functional need and ensure that the test is met, and I would suggest that the information is, well, woefully deficient in terms of the test, in terms of this particular case. It may be that through a further application and submission of more information that we could consider in the future that there may be a case, but I don't believe there's information here. In this case, the other thing I would stress is that it's not just a functional test, but also a financial need for a permanent dwelling in terms of the holding. Is the enterprise financially sound? I'm not even sure from what's been said that there is a holding or a business in itself. This sounds more like someone helping out on the Escott estate. And I don't know what other accommodation exists on the Escott estate that could potentially fulfill any functional need that is were to be identified. So my advice would remain, I think in answer to Councillor Rylance's questions, we are being entirely consistent with the requirements of H4 and how we've applied that elsewhere. I don't think we have the evidence to conclude that there is a functional need in this case, and would stand by the recommendation. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Ed. Next, I have Councillor Ollie Davey to speak, please.
Thank you, Chair. Well, Ed's just covered off several of the points I was going to make as well. The security and employment issues just are not in themselves sufficient justification, and I will recall that on a number of occasions we've turned those down because they don't demonstrate an essential need for that worker to be on the site. And I've got great sympathy for the personal circumstances of this person. I don't want to feel that we are tipping somebody out of their home, that they've obviously been there for some time, but it is totally against our policy. And we can't just say, well, in this case, we'll make an exception. There are just no circumstances in which case we can do that. I'd have thought a better option might be to convert one of the existing buildings, which they could probably do under permitted development. But in this case, I can't support approval. I have to go with the officer's recommendation and support refusal because there's simply no mitigating circumstances to allow that, in my view.
Is that a proposal, Councillor Davey?
Yes, I will propose refusal.
Thank you very much, Councillor Davey. And do we have a seconder for that?
I'll do that. And I'd like to speak, if I may, because there's a bit more to add to this, which hasn't been mentioned yet. And I think it's quite important to mention it because there's two issues going on here. One is the issue of our planning policy, which we need to be really rigid with, and we do need to be rigid with it. I've got people putting caravans in fields in my patch and assuming that they're going to go down this process and then go to appeal, and it's just literally turning up in fields. And it's not happening just here; it's happening all over. And Ed highlighted that earlier. We've got a real issue going on here with people in caravans and trying to turn them into dwellings. We just have to be really quite tight, and whether it's because of chances or whether it's because of the circumstances that people are in at the moment, I don't really know the answers to that. But we've got our policies, and that's what it is. But the issue I wanted to raise here is that the sad part is that it from this gentleman's perspective and from the two ward members and from their feeling, and there is a policy aspect of looking at this, and there's a moral aspect. And the moral aspect has to be, this gentleman is obviously running his business for me, and he's run it from there for a very long time. And had he been, if it is 2014 and he can quantify that, he'd only needed another 2 years. And of course, he would have been able to go for a certificate of lawful use. So he's 8 years in, and another 2 years of hiding under the radar. If anybody wants to use that as a way of working, then one would say in 8 years, nobody's complained up to now. What harm has it been? And I think that's the moral aspect of where it's come from. This is not somebody who's just trying, doesn't sound to me like somebody who's just trying it on. It's somebody who's actually, probably through circumstances, probably through how things evolve, things in his personal life, he's ended up working there. He's had machinery to do that. He's helped the Escort estate. He's got his way in, if you mind it, if that's a way of putting it. I don't know it's quite right way of putting it, but of saying it is. So I absolutely understand for where the ward members are coming from. And had I gone and met the gentleman concerned, and I don't know if he's got a wife or family, I don't know, but let's say the gentleman concerned, and that's how it's been highlighted to us here today, then there is that feeling of this guy's doing some really good stuff and it all makes sense. And there is that aspect of it. Absolutely get it, on it. And another 2 years, he'd have probably had a certificate of lawful use, and that would have been done. And there wouldn't have been much we could do about it through the planning process. But that's not now what's happened. And probably what has happened is with the works that have been done on the estate in that particular part, planning officers have had to turn up through other applications, and they've seen this take place, and they've asked the question, and that's why it's happened and why it's come to pass. But the real question here is absolutely sticking to our policies at the moment. If the gentleman had been working in forestry and he was employed in forestry and was employed by the estate and was working, or in fact, not even employed by the state necessarily, but employed, self-employed, but working in forestry and was able to claim some way of having a mobile home on that basis, then we could understand where this application could go. And Ed has made a very, very good point. Again, of course, had he had information coming forward on that basis, and the officers had been able to determine where that was in his capacity of work and working it within this particular application, it may be a slightly different outcome than what it is at the moment. The problem, we haven't got that, and the officers haven't got that in their remit. If he did have that in his remit, it would mitigate those people who are chancers, who are trying it on to somebody in real circumstances who is trying to get into a good place for all the right reasons. So we're caught between, if you mind to have it, and I absolutely understand the ward members, they're caught between a hard place and a rock. They want to help, but they know really our policies don't really hang up to it. And like I say, 2 years more in, and he would have been able to, if he could have, evidence-based through a certificate of lawful use. We're not there. We're here, and we're here today. As it stands today, if we don't stand robust in our policy, and if we don't stand robust in the fact that, as Ed has already declared, we've already gone to upline to have to move somebody out. And this isn't the first one. We've got several of these now taking place. If we don't show willingness to stand by our policies today, I think we'll put ourselves into a little bit of a problem. So I'm reluctantly, I feel for this gentleman, I feel for the circumstances, I feel for the situation, and I fully understand why the ward members pushing and promoting something for all the right reasons. But I'm afraid to say there is no real strong policy, depth of policy from this applicant that has given us any depth to help with our policy to get us over the line. So I'm afraid I'm going to have to go with a refusal on this application, because I don't see that we have any other choice, because if we do, we're going to have all sorts of problems further down the road. Problems members won't want, but then could possibly refer it back to, and I realise each application is done on its own. What about the one at Clapper and Taylor Escott then, which you allowed? And that's where the officers are, and that's what they have to protect. And we have to protect our policies in this particular circumstances, because it is a growing situation. This is not a one-off. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Councillor Skinner. I now move on to Councillor Bruce Desarum, please.
Thank you very much. I think Councillor Skinner has very eloquently stated the case, but I would say that there are positive things from this, insofar as it says, the caravan and nearby dwellings are accessed. The caravan is not widely visible from the public viewpoints, as the ward members said, and I have every sympathy with the points the ward members put forward. But as Councillor Skinner lucidly outlined, it really, with the position of upline, it really would be an enormous risk to take were we to deviate from policy. So I think we can't deviate from the policy set. Particularly as it says on page 99, it is not considered that the proposal is being promoted as, nor would likely be any of the special circumstances outlined. And that's the key problem. There are no reasons why it meets the special circumstances. And so for that reason, unfortunately, it has to be refused. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Desarum. Next, I have Councillor Key to speak, please.
Thank you, Chair. Could I just ask Mr. Freeman to go back to the picture that was there showing the caravan with the lorry chassis there? I'd just like to ask a question. I mean, I think this is a very difficult one like Councillor Skinner said, we're between a rock and a hard place anyway. Yes, thank you, Mr. Freeman. Right, now looking at that caravan, there's some uprights there. Was that part of an existing shed at one time and another? Because if so, surely that could have almost been converted into those uprights. Are they ones that have been there as part of an existing shed years ago, or have they been put there fairly recent? I don't know. That was all I wanted to ask.
Through you, Chair, the answer is I don't know, but I don't, well, get a better view there. Well, I mean, I have looked at the aerial photographs recently for this site, and certainly there wasn't a building on this part of the site in recent times. I mean, going back the last 10 years. So I don't know what these supports come from or why those are there, to be honest. So sorry, I can't help with that question.
Thank you, Ed. Next, I have Councillor Rylance to speak, please.
Thank you for allowing me to come back, Chair. So I think this case highlights how very much we need more council houses, more social-owned houses in our district, because people don't choose to live in a caravan in a yard like this because they have lots of money and that's what they like to do. They do it often because they have no choice. And I think that the moral takeaway from this is that we need to be building more council houses so that people have somewhere to live that's affordable and decent. I wanted to pick up on something that Mr. Freeman said actually about chicken farm. Well, no, about livestock, about supervision of livestock. Just quickly in passing, because actually just around the corner from us there is what I call stealth farm, a farm that arose out of a green field. Because the applicants wanted to have chickens and they needed to be on site to keep the fox away. So I'm not convinced that that's a 100% watertight policy that you quoted there, because that particular farm now has its own farmhouse and sheds, and it's a functioning farm. And 10 years ago there was nothing there. So I do question whether that actually is a policy. The other policy I'd like to highlight is the one in our emerging local plan, which is that travel to work times are reduced. So, do we have a compelling reason for forcing this gentleman to go and live somewhere far away from where he works, when we're trying to encourage people to live and work in roughly the same place? That's my question.
Thank you, Ed. Can you come back on those?
Thank you, Chair. Well, I mean, just on the first point, I mean, we do obviously have new farm holdings being established in the district from time to time, and as long as they can demonstrate a functional need to live on site, then I don't see a problem with that. It's not uncommon for poultry farms to need a presence on site from a functional basis in terms of the welfare of the animals. So I don't know the specific circumstances of the case that Councillor Rylance is referring to, but it's quite conceivable that that was quite legitimate and complied with our policies. In terms of commuting distances, I hear what's been said, and I think this comes up on a later application on this agenda as well, but it seems to me people's commuting journeys are only one type of journey that they make. If they then are required to travel even further distances to access basic services and facilities, to get to a shop or schools or other basic facilities, then I don't see that it's more sustainable necessarily for people to live directly next to their place of work. But if that place of work is in the countryside, then our policies would still only permit that where there is a functional need. And as I say, there isn't in this case. But I think it's far more complicated than just saying that by reducing their commuting mileage, we're reducing their carbon footprint, and that's an improvement, because there's so many other journeys that people need to make in their basic lives that would still require the use of a private car. So I don't think I'm afraid I don't think that stacks up as an argument in this case. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Next, I have Councillor Pratt to speak, please.
Thank you, Chair. Ed, you said that you received a letter today from the applicant, was that right?
Yes, that's right. I was alerted earlier while we were talking about this exact case, but I think having reviewed the document, I think it largely documents the points that you yourself made, Councillor Pratt, about his activities on the Escott estate and the work he's done and how long he's lived at the site. So I don't think there's anything new in there for me to bring to members' attention.
Yeah, I only say that because it's clear that we are short of information on this case. And having asked for certain things, we are still short, and it's a shame. Thank you.
Cheers. Thank you, Councillor Pratt. Right, so we have a resolution to refuse as per the officer's recommendation, proposed by Councillor Davey and seconded by Councillor Skinner. I'll now go over to Mrs. Shaw to sum up, please.
Thank you, members. You've just heard the recommendation. Please, when your name is called, would you indicate whether you're in support of the motion to recommend refusal, you're against the motion to recommend a refusal, or whether you're abstaining from the vote?
Councillor Brown.
Yeah, reluctantly support.
Councillor Chamberlain.
Support the recommendation to refuse.
Councillor Davey.
Regretfully support the recommendation.
Councillor De Sarum.
Regretfully support recommendation.
Councillor Key.
Regretfully refuse.
Councillor Lawrence.
Support refusal.
Councillor Pratt.
Abstain.
Councillor Rylance.
Abstain.
Councillor Skinner.
Support refusal.
Thank you. That is recommended for refusal.
Thank you very much. Now we move on to agenda item 14, application number 221371, full application, Cheriton Farm, Payhembury, pages 103 to 113. I would like to welcome to the meeting Philip Coleman. But first of all, we will go over to Ed to present his report, please.
Thank you, Chair. So hopefully you can see my screen again. This application relates to Cheriton Farm, Payhembury, which lies in a small hamlet known as Lower Cheriton. So this is Cheriton Farm here, and the site is in here. You can see Lower Cheriton, Higher Cheriton, and coal stocks over here. So this application links back to a previous application from 2020 for the conversion of some of the existing barns at the site in here to 3 dwellings. And permission was granted at that time using the existing access into the site, which is here, that runs between Cheriton Farmhouse and Albany, and out into the main road through the hamlet. The applicants now propose to introduce a new access to serve that development, which would come in off the road here through the fields and out into the farmyard here. And if I go through the plans, you can see, so this takes advantage of an existing field entrance onto the lane here and would form a hard surfaced access point to here, at which point it would be basically 2 tyre tracks of hard surfacing with a grass verge up the middle that runs through here along the field boundary, cuts through the hedgerow here and down into the farmyard. I understand the proposal is to ensure that residents of the 3 dwellings can only use this access by putting a post and rail fence up that would prevent them from using the existing access through here, but this access itself would remain as access for Cheriton Farmhouse itself. And so here we have a cross section showing how the track, or the majority of the track, would be constructed. Essentially as 2 hard surface pads for vehicle tyres with a grass verge up the middle. And this is what they propose in terms of construction traffic, which is part of the issue I think they're trying to address here, is concerns about bringing construction traffic into the site through the existing access, which is quite narrow. And also the impact of that on residents within the hamlet. So the proposal is to bring construction traffic in through this route and then out again down the alternative route. So if I just flick through the photographs. So this is the existing access into the yard. That's Cheriton Farmhouse on the left-hand side. So as you can see, it is of a reasonable width. Obviously, it's accommodated agricultural traffic in the past, but visibility is quite limited in both directions, I understand, from that access. Having said that, the Highway Authority were content that it could accommodate the additional traffic from the proposed 3 dwellings through the conversion of the barns. when consent was granted in 2020. If we go across, I might take these in reverse actually. So if we start at the access out onto the highway, this is the existing field access into here. I understand these hedgerows would need to be cut back to improve the visibility displays, but fundamentally they would remain. And then the track would run across the field in through here. Oh, wrong way. Across the field. Oh, sorry, I keep going the wrong way. Across the field, along the boundary, through the gap, and through to the farmyard. It is quite a long stretch. I think the report refers to it being around 200 metres in length. And fundamentally, the justification, as I understand it, is partly to improve highway safety because of the deficiencies in terms of the existing access, but also to reduce disruption to residents in the area, both during the construction phase, but also after the dwellings, the conversion works have taken place and the dwellings are occupied, in terms of vehicles coming and going through this access. So the question really for members, I think, is whether or not the harm in terms of the impact of this, both in terms of the landscape character and rural character of the area. Obviously, this is cutting across a large length of agricultural field to the detriment of its visual amenity and the character of the area, but also leading to the loss of what is a relatively modest area, but still grade 1 agricultural land. Versus the benefits of that, and we have sought some further advice from the Highway Authority in terms of that, who have explained that the existing access only provides visibility for up to 3 metres, whereas the proposed visibility would be nearing 40 metres from the proposed access here. So they do consider that there's a fairly significant benefit in highway safety terms in that, but only if residents are prevented from using the existing access. And as I said, the existing access would remain for Cheriton Farmhouse, while the proposal is to fence off and that route to prevent residents of the 3 barns accessing through there. I'm not entirely clear from the plans how that will work, and whether or not indeed it would be appropriate for us to condition that, having previously granted consent for the 3 barns to be served through the existing access. It would seem contradictory to now say that they couldn't access through that route. So I don't think we can actually achieve the outcome that the Highway Authority are suggesting that would be acceptable to them in terms of that. So in officers' view, the harm and impact of this is not, in our view, justified by the highways benefits in terms of the improvements in terms of the access and safety, except that disruption to residents, particularly during the construction phase, could be quite significant, but there is no reason why this couldn't be used as a temporary construction access. Even without the need for planning permission, it's the hard surfacing of this route that generates the need for planning permission. So I don't see any reason why construction traffic couldn't come through here if needed during the construction phase. But I think once the 3 dwellings are occupied, the additional vehicle movements through here would not, to my mind, cause significant disturbance to residents. And the levels of traffic were, back in 2020, considered to be so low as to not cause a significant highway safety issue through that access. So I don't see that the harm from this is justified by its benefits fundamentally. And I think that really sums up the case. So the recommendation remains, as per the report, to refuse the application on the basis of the harm to the landscape and the character of the area through the creation of the access and the track, and the small loss of high-grade agricultural land, which is contrary to the policies listed in the reason for refusal in the report. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Ed. I'd like to now go over to the applicant, please, Philip Coleman. You're still on mute at the moment, if you can hear us.
There we go. I think I've got it.
Excellent.
Sorry about this. It's all new technology to me. Thank you for meeting this morning. Good morning. I am new to this procedure, so excuse me if I don't get it exactly right. I have a few points I've noted down about the application. Obviously, I've just listened to Ed Freeman's input, which seemed very balanced in its main, I have to say. Couple of little points, mind you. I'm not sure the farmland is classed as grade 1, however, that would have to be confirmed. So my notes are, the existing entrance, while as was approved for the development originally, has been described as substandard by the local authority themselves. And as was indicated by Ed, that the Highways Authority have determined that our proposed route and sightlines are far better than the 3 metres we get from the existing entrance, and in fact give us 40 metres of improved sightlines. That's something we refer to in correspondence with the planners. So I think that's quite important, and this is an improved access. The officers are concerned about the impact of the field. We've addressed this with the planners with amendments to our application. You know, it's not a hard road all the way through. It's very farm-like in its basis, in keeping with a farm track. You know, rolled stone, not hard surfacing and stuff. And I did notice one thing on the drawing. It showed a fence line on the drawing you were looking at. We were asked to remove that, and we have in our latest application. So that drawing seemed a little bit out of date, but that's a very small thing. So, you know, we feel that it is the track is very in keeping with how a farm would be used. We've had small concerns by listed, not massive, you know, however, they've commented that there's no direct visual impact to the grade 2 listed farmhouse. And in fact, the drive area goes outside of the curtilage of the listed property. We've noted that the new access we're proposing will remove all traffic for conversions away from the listed property. In turn, like I said, you know, it improves the setting of the listed property. And Ed did notice that there was, or mentioned there was no way of preventing us from using existing access. On our plan, it does clearly show there's a fence line that prevents us using existing access if the new one is granted. So, you know, we're not trying to use both, we just want the one. The report committee stated in some of the correspondence that the application is removing and altering an uninterrupted expanse of hedge. You know,
30 seconds remaining.
Right. This is not true. I think Ed's referred to it as an existing entrance that is in current use. That's why, you know, I appreciate it's got to be judged on its own merits, but we're aware other access has been formed into hedges within a mile of our application that's actually currently being constructed at the moment. More importantly, I think the local residents have really expressed support for this. They're very concerned about the existing entrance. You know, they've been very good. And finally, the proposal will improve highway safety for the lifetime of development. That's all I have to say, and thank you for listening to me.
Thank you very much for speaking. I note that Councillor Mike Howe has just joined the meeting. Just quickly, do you have any declarations of interest at all?
Sorry, no, none. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Howe. Next, we'll move on to the committee ward member for this application, and that is Councillor Skinner, please.
Thank you. And I started with this application, which was for the barns, conversion of the barns. Must have been a couple of years, two years, actually with COVID, you tend to forget to maybe 3 years ago now. And I was actually thinking that the road proposal was put in, and I actually thought that the road proposal was part of the application 2 or 3 years ago, and obviously it's not, and it's come up now. And I can remember going to see the residents probably like I say, probably 3 years ago. And some people had reservations about what was going to happen, obviously, within this farm unit. And I can remember several people turned up from all around there. And when I say several, it's not hundreds, because there isn't that many people. It's a small hamlet. There's, I don't know, 15, 20, something like that. And we turned up to somebody's house and they let me have their views. And most people, although they were concerned about the conversion and that part passed, they were all in view of support of the road, to my memory. And this, let's call it a track, because it is a track. It's not actually a full road. It's just two wheel widths wide with grass coming up into the middle. And I looked at that and I saw it coming down through across the field. And we have to start from point A. And the point A is that this could be used for agricultural purposes anyway. So the person owning the land to the house can actually come through that gate, come through that field, do what they like. This is the creation of a track. So it's not whether or not they can do it or not. They can actually go in and out. The existing gate is there on the top of the road, which Mr. Freeman showed. And I don't know, Mr. Freeman, could you perhaps go back to that? Because I think it's quite important. It's the entrance on the road to the gateway. And that entrance is just a normal 10, 12-foot gateway, whatever you want to call it. And I know that the vehicles, tractors and trailers that come out of there is quite tight, because obviously tractors are a lot bigger today. This is an old farm type unit. That's the one. Press on that one, Ed. That's it. That's the one coming out of that entrance. Now you can see that all the roads around here, and they're all like it around Cheriton, they're all like this. By this entrance cutting back and making it a bit better, we'd actually make it on this road, which is really, really quiet. The highways obviously have no objection to this, from what Mr. Freeman was just saying. In principle, they didn't have any objection. What he went on to say was the impact of coming out and using the other drive or not. But the other drive, and if you could go forward, Mr. Freeman, to the drive, the existing drive that we have, which is right down into the hamlet itself, which is in the hub of it. That's the one, that one. I'm sorry, back into the hub of it, that drive there. So if you look up through that gate, you see the crinkly tin sheds up there. That's all the part to be converted. On your left here is the farmhouse that's I understand was either going to be or has been sold off separately. So that's the existing entrance in. What you can't see by that photo, which is a shame, is the closeness between the end of that wall, or both walls that are there, and the property this side of the road. So I would say whoever's taken that photo is really stood really nearly on the wall of the property right opposite. It's a pity we don't have the gate, the picture coming from that way looking opposite, because if you did, and anybody who knows anything about construction, I saw there are members here, people like Dave Keenach would absolutely know that you're not actually going to get an 8-wheeler to come in there with stone or anything else to do what they're going to do, because it's too narrow. Now, in my view, I try to take in the balance of them having discussions in coming down through the hedge, which they can use anyway, put in a 2-wheel track, not a full track, and having it as permeable is actually just making what would be good use of vehicles instead of coming out on this entrance, which is really quite narrow, which is not a problem with that happening. But in coming out this entrance, whatever choice of coming out at the entrance at the top end and using that entrance, it would serve two benefits. One benefit would be for the construction traffic, because they wouldn't have to come down through the narrow lane to get through this way, which I understand. And as Mr. Freeman was suggested, that actually why don't they construct a temporary drive in, and then they could take the temporary drive up. Well, that's not really where it could benefit this particular hamlet. The parish council, on top of that, it comes out top road, make the entrance slightly better. The parish council have got no objections with this particular drive, and neither has anybody from the hamlet of Cheriton. In fact, I'll go even further. Not only are there no objections from either the parish council, the people who live there and have to deal with this every day, and myself as a ward member, there is letters that third parties have written in supporting this particular drive coming down through here. So the people who live there see great benefits in having this entrance coming out the top. And I can remember that actually there was people saying, we would be more supportive of this application. This was before the application was approved for the barn conversions. If there was an entrance coming out at the top end, which they could actually do. So for me, when I looked at this and when this came forward, I was surprised that the road wasn't in because I thought it was anyway. So anyway, it came back again and I was a bit baffled. Luckily, the gentlemen, the people who have bought it actually own all of the land. So this is, to me, is one opportunity that if there is a way of creating a benefit for this particular property, now is the time. And the reason now is the time is because the ownership of being able to complete this is now. Once the barns get converted, and once the barns move into different ownerships of different people, and the house and that as well, the ability then of the farmland being sold probably to hither and dither and one thing and another, and then expecting people to move in, who would they put in the road and who wouldn't pay for it, who's got the right of way and who hasn't, and all those legal obligations that go with it. This window of opportunity that is in front of us here today is here in a once in a lifetime. Because the opportunity for this to happen again, if we go, 12 months time or after it's completed, 2 years time, what do you want to say? Wouldn't it have been better if we'd had an entrance at the top and then trying to pull that together of everybody seeing the benefit of what could have come from that will be lost. So for me, when they talk about the harm coming down through the hedge like it has, if you turned up on site and saw it, it is nothing quite like, in my opinion, as Mr. Freeman has suggested, and I probably think Mr. Freeman has looked at it from Google Maps. That's fine. I get that. And Mr. Freeman's a busy man. I get that. And the officers have been in site and the officers have taken some pictures, and I understand that. It's not quite the same as turning up. When you turn up and see the site, I'd say to a man and a dog that anybody who would understand what this was about, in understanding what was trying to be achieved, would go, well, that makes sense, doesn't it? And it absolutely does. It absolutely makes sense. So the reason I'm going for a recommendation of approval on this particular application is because, to me, all the dots join up. And as far as policy is concerned, as the planner who was dealing with this application, I'm not going to name names, but the planner who's dealing with it was said to me, it's one of those knife edge ones. We ain't really quite sure which way to go. It could go either way. So here we are. So I've said, well, I put my colours to the mast. This is a one opportunity that I think we could get something really good for this, for everybody concerned. And there's no dissenters here, none other than our planning officer. I'll leave it to that, ladies and gentlemen and members and colleagues, and let you make your own minds up. But my view, I'm making a recommendation for approval of this application. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Skinner. So that is a proposal of approval. Do we have a seconder?
I'll second it. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Key, do you wish to speak now?
No, it's Councillor Lawrence.
Oh, I'm so sorry, Councillor Lawrence. All these people on the screen. Councillor Lawrence, do you wish to speak now?
No, only to reiterate what Councillor Skinner has said. He made a very good case for pushing this forward. Again, I don't like going against officers' opinion, but it does make very, very good sense, and I think it's going to make a lot of difference. Not having to take construction traffic in through that narrow gateway next to the Grade 2 listed building. So I'm in total agreement with what Councillor Skinner has proposed. Thank you
very much. Thank you very much, Councillor Lawrence. So now we go on to speakers. We have Councillor Ollie Davey to start with, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I agree with Councillor Skinner. This is a bit of a knife edge one. However, we're hearing about the construction traffic, but as Ed has pointed out, the construction traffic could just as easily use what is proposed for the track, simply by putting in a temporary trackway there if needed, and bringing in construction traffic that way. So I think it's difficult because we have to ask ourselves whether the benefits of this outweigh the harm. And while the amenity of residents may be marginally improved, 3 new dwellings is not going to generate an awful lot more traffic, and it obviously wasn't considered to outweigh any other considerations the last time this application came through. So it was approved without feeling that the amenity of residents was going to be damaged. And there were no highway issues at that time. We can see that maybe there's a marginal improvement by having a wider field of view going out onto the other road. But on the other hand, the other road may be a faster road, so you might need that wider field of view. So I think it's very delicately balanced, and they are proposing to put a trackway all the way across a field, and that has got to result in some harm, I'd have thought, to its viability as a field, so I'm not in support of this at the moment, because I can't see that the benefits actually outweigh the harm that would be caused. And I think we have to bear in mind that, as Ed has pointed out, construction traffic could use that access anyway, even without needing a permanent trackway.
Thank you very much, Councillor Davey. Next, we move on to Councillor Key, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I mean, I fully support this in actual fact, because as Councillor Skinner said, I mean, there could be a track up across that field for agricultural purposes anyway, and nobody could stop or do it. What I would like to emphasise is that fence that is going to be put there to prevent people, I think it's going to be a permanent fence, not. I would like to see perhaps a stone wall there rather than just a wooden fence, which could at any time be dismantled or taken down and used. But I would like to see something a bit more permanent there to make sure that those 3 units there do not use the old access. Thank you.
Very much. Next, I have Councillor Brown, please.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I mean, if this application is so finely balanced, yeah, by the planning officers and by this committee, because people seem reluctant to talk on it, perhaps the best way would be a site visit, so we could all go around there and see for ourselves what the access and ingress is like.
Thank you very much. I think we'll go back to Ed, if we can, to answer any questions that have been raised.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to share my screen because I've navigated to Google Street View for this site so that members can have a better view of the existing access, which I thought might help. If I can jig things on my desktop, bear with me a second. Wonders of technology. Here we go. Hopefully you can see that. So this is the existing access that Councillor Skinner was referring to. So you can see the access way is through there. The existing farmhouse is there. So there is, you know, it's tight obviously with the wall here, but there is reasonable width there. I think what concerned me when I looked at this in terms of the comparison of the 2 accesses, as I think if I was driving through here, I would be going quite slowly because I would be quite mindful that there are buildings right onto the edge of the carriageway. Walls is very much feeling like a hamlet. It's residential. There could be pedestrians, cyclists. I think I would be driving quite slowly through that area. Whereas I think if I was driving through here down a lane, this would be a 60-mile-an-hour limit, and I'm not saying I would be doing 60, but I think I would be going faster. So I think I would agree with the point Councillor Davey made. I think is that yes, there is an improvement in terms of the visibility displays, but I think you need much bigger visibility displays in this location than you do here, because of the conditions of the highway and the speeds that vehicles are likely to be going at. So I just urge caution in terms of thinking that we're going from a 3-metre visibility display to a 40-metre visibility display. That's however many times better that is. I think it's a lot more complex than that in terms of that. I would also reiterate what I said about construction traffic. I don't see any reason why construction traffic couldn't use this access anyway. I appreciate it's going across a field, but many construction sites start off as a field, and construction traffic goes over various temporary surfaces, such as a form of matting that can be put down to overcome any wet conditions and ensure sufficient traction for vehicles across there. So I really don't see this as a major benefit in terms of the construction traffic. It would be the operation of an occupation of the 3 dwellings once they've been put there through the conversion of the barns that leads to the benefit, I would suggest. And as I say, I think that is a marginal benefit for what is quite a significant area of hard surfacing that would need to be created. So I just flag up those points, and hopefully the additional information of being able to see a bit more of the existing access is helpful. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Ed. Next, I have Councillor Rylance to speak, please.
Thank you, Chair. So it seems to me that three dwellings in barn conversions, they'll want to be involved in the life of the hamlet. So what better way to involve them in the life of the hamlet than keeping this driveway the way it is? Got a lovely curved visibility display. You'll only be crawling out of there in your car and you'll see other people, because that's the way we talk to each other in the countryside. I honestly can't see any good reason whatsoever for turning up half a field to provide a different entrance that will actually take the future residents of this development away from their hamlet. I mean, I'm just going to support the officer recommendation for refusal, I'm afraid. I can't see any good reason to support this. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Rylance. Next, I have Councillor Key, please.
Thank you, Chair. I would just sort of pick up a point if Mr. Freeman could bring back that same picture again there, please. Because I mean, over the years, I've held a class 1 heavy goods vehicle license. Now, there are no little 4-wheel lorries on the road now. They're either 6-wheeler or 8-wheelers. And I cannot see how that they would get round there without scraping the wall with the back of the lorry and having to shunt to actually get into that entrance. I just can't see it happening. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Key. I have Councillor Ollie Davey next to speak, please.
Yeah, I'm just going to come back very quickly on that. That's not our problem. The constructors of the 3 dwellings needed to have this in mind before they asked for approval. There was no indication then that they would have difficulties accessing the site. In fact, they probably assured us that they could. So the access for construction traffic is not our problem, and I don't think we need a permanent trackway over the field to allow the construction traffic. And I think this is a bit of a red herring, and it's simply going to result in a permanent trackway across a field. That's what the application is for, not a temporary trackway. So I still stand by refusal.
Thank you very much, Councillor Davey. Next, Councillor De Sarum, please.
Thank you very much, Chair. Yeah, if I've been listening to the debate, and if I've heard it correctly, assuming that the fence has been removed that they touched on, the benefits would be that visibility would be at 40 metres. So there'll be, as I see it, if this goes ahead, there'll be an improvement in visibility, which will, of course, result in improvements to highway safety. And I think Councillor Skinner also made the argument that the hamlet would be good for everyone concerned within the hamlet. So there will be benefits for residents who have obviously got together and feel very positive about it. So for those thoughts, I believe it is a very sensible proposal and should not be refused at this time. But obviously, I await other members' thoughts. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Desarum. Next, I have Councillor Lawrence, please.
Thank you, Chair. Excuse me. I don't remember exactly, but I think it was the last meeting, somewhere around Lympstone, we agreed that somebody had bought a house with no access to the house, and we agreed to allow a permanent path be put in across a field, not just a field, it was part of the green wedge on the edge of Lympstone. And we approved that application. This is far less harmful than that application. And I can understand what Councillor Key has said with trying to get 8-wheeler lorries around that tight bend, that there's going to be damage to buildings or whatever. And I know that Councillor Davies said it's not our problem. I know it's not our problem, but it is a problem. And I think that the best result is to have the new way in. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Councillor Lawrence. So we have a proposal to approve, not refuse, first by Councillor Skinner and seconded by Councillor Lawrence. We will go over to Mrs. Shaw now, please.
Thank you, Chair. As you would imagine, I have something to add. Councillor Skinner and Councillor Lawrence, as this is a recommendation against officer recommendation, could you just clarify your reasons for going against the officer recommendation? And while you're thinking of that, would you be agreeable to inserting the delegation of conditions to officers in consultation with the chair, vice chair and ward member, as we normally do for approvals?
I'm in favour of that, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And if you want some reasons for why we're going against officer recommendation, improvement in visibility onto the road, less intrusion of traffic out of a condensed site, which is the existing site. So what did I say first time? Sorry, what did I say?
Improvement in visibility.
Improvement in the visibility to the site, improvement on the site. Well, that's enough, really, isn't it? Improvement of visibility onto the site, and actually, I was trying to think. I'm trying to think of the words. Troy, you try to think on your feet, didn't you? I'm trying to think of the words that the improvement to the what would be the enhanced improvement to the barn conversions through this particular access.
Okay, thank you very much. Therefore, members, you have a recommendation to approve with the delegation of conditions to officers in consultation with chair, vice chair and ward member. Please, when your name is called, whether you indicate whether you are in support of the motion to recommend approval, whether you're against the recommendation of approval, or whether you're abstaining from the vote. Thank you.
Can I just come in very quickly and just check? Ed, did you want to come back in at this point quickly?
Thank you, Chair. Well, I was going to just check in terms of the conditions, because I think one of the speakers mentioned about, and I can't remember whether it was one of the proposer or seconder, but somebody mentioned about the fence that was proposed to prevent residents of the 3 barn conversions from being able to use the existing access. I just wanted to clarify whether that was part of the motion. And if it is, to just clarify that I would need to do some digging, but I'm not entirely convinced we can do that. Having previously granted consent for it all served off the existing access, it would seem unreasonable to then impose such a condition. So I just wanted some clarification on that in terms of the conditions, particularly if they're going to be delegated to officers, if there was particular intent in mind by, in terms of this motion, in terms of that issue. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. I believe that was Councillor Lawrence, unless I'm
No,
very...
it was Councillor Key suggested it. But I'm not in favour of that. But anyway, let Councillor Key have his say.
No, I'm quite happy to. I mean, I think if they're going to have it, there wants to be a permanent fence, whether it's sort of, you know, I mean, it can be of wood, but I would have thought a stone one would have been attractive. But quite happy to go along with the proposal.
Thank you very much, Councillor Key. So we'll go over to Wendy now for a roll call, please.
Thank you, Chair. So I'll start with Councillor Brown.
Yes, support the recommendation.
Councillor Chamberlain.
Support the recommendation.
Councillor Davey.
Against the recommendation.
Councillor De Sarum.
Support approval.
Councillor Key.
Support approval.
Councillor Lawrence.
Support approval.
Councillor Pratt.
Support approval.
Councillor Rylance.
Against.
Councillor Skinner.
Support approval.
Thank you. The application is recommended for approval.
Thank you very much, Wendy. Members, I'd just like to take a quick 10-minute comfort break, if that's okay, for people to be able to go and get a drink and bits and pieces. It's now nearly 1 o'clock, so shall we say back at 1:10, 1:10, if everybody's happy with that? We only have 2 more applications to go then after this.
Yep, that's fine. Super.
Fine by me.
Thank you. Members, if I could just ask you to mute, please, because the live stream will be running.
Are you guys still here at the, we're still at planning?
We are.
Yeah, I've moved into strategic planning committee meeting now.
Yeah, sorry, the wrong slide has been put up, but we thought because the meeting was because we were due to start, we thought it was pointless taking it down. We was hoping no one would notice, Councillor Skinner.
That's likely. Not in front of Councillor Skinner.
I'm having some fun, Wendy. Why can't I have some fun every now and again?
I've had strategic planning on my mind for quite a while, so why.
Haven't we all?
Will next week.
God, yesterday was a bit of a bun fight, wasn't
it? Yeah, never mind. We're all good. We're okay.
Chair, are you ready to commence?
Yes, we've got apologies, I believe, now, though, from Councillor Rylance.
Yeah, shall I just do a quick roll call?
Yeah, I think so.
Just so
Probably
we can.
best.
Okay, so Councillor Chamberlain?
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Brown?
Yeah, present.
Thank you. Councillor Davey?
Present.
Thank you. Councillor De Sarum?
Present. Thank you, Wendy.
Thank you. We now have Councillor Howe.
Well, I thought you'd have finished by now, but yes, I'm present.
Thank you. Councillor Key?
Present and correct.
Thank you. Councillor Lawrence?
I'm here as well, Wendy. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Pratt?
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Skinner?
Present. Thank you.
Yeah, and apologies from Councillor Rylance.
That's lovely. Thank you very much, Wendy. So moving on now, we go on to agenda item 10, which is application number 221506, full application, Appledore Farm, Farway, pages 66 to 76. There are no public speakers for this application, so we'll move straight over to Ed to present his report, please.
Thank you, Chair. So this application is for the demolition and rebuilding of an existing barn to form a two-bedroom dwelling. So the site is at Appledore Farm, which is just down here, so in the countryside south of Honiton. And you can just about see the barn in question here is part of a group of buildings just to the north of a larger farm complex. So through a complicated mix of planning applications and appeals, the applicants essentially have consent to convert the existing building to a two-bedroom dwelling. And that consent is extant. What they are looking to do is to basically supersede that with a consent that allows them to demolish the existing building and rebuild it, but to the same form as was previously granted as a conversion. So you can see on the plan the existing plans and elevations of the building. And this is the proposed arrangement. So you can see it gets it's very similar in terms of the basic form, various changes in fenestration to facilitate additional natural light into the living spaces, but fundamentally very similar. And effectively, I think what they're trying to achieve is a more efficient dwelling by building it to modern construction standards. They're saying it would be more energy efficient, more airtight and thermally efficient to enable cheaper running costs of the dwelling in the long term. Essentially, the issue before you is the fact that our policies don't accommodate that. Obviously, taken in itself, it's a new build dwelling in the countryside, which obviously our policies don't permit, which is why the application's before you today. But obviously, given the fallback position, the end result in planning terms is fundamentally the same as it would be if they implemented the extant conversion scheme. And I think for that reason, the parish council in this case have not objected to the application, and we have 3 letters of support from residents in the area. So the application is effectively causing no greater harm in planning terms than the original proposal. So the recommendation is to approve subject to conditions. Well, just take you through the photographs actually. So this is the existing building. As you can see, it's cut into the slope of the ground, quite an attractive stone barn. And yes, that's the sort of main elevation. So you can see they're cutting in some additional fenestration in to provide greater levels of natural light, but fundamentally the form of the building would be as built as the present. So as I say, the recommendation is to approve. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Ed. So as we have no speakers, we can go straight over to committee if anybody wants to speak. And we have Councillor Brewster Sarum, please.
I'd like to propose approval for the reasons that Ed has specified. There's natural light. It's going to become a more efficient dwelling with cheaper running costs. There is no greater harm, and the form of the building will remain as seen. And also on page 67, I read the summary where there is a fallback position if we were not entirely happy to approve it anyway. So it could go ahead under fallback. So for those reasons, I'm happy to propose approval as per the report. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much,
That.
and we have Ollie Davey as seconder. I'll let you speak next, Ollie. Thank you.
Yeah, I can't see the harm here. It's going to result in a more efficient building, which is obviously a good thing, and it's going to be in principle identical to the conversion. And as Councillor De Sarum has pointed out, there's already a fallback position which we've often considered as material in allowing these things. So although it's a slight departure from policy, we have done this before actually, where it was discovered that the building wasn't capable of conversion. There was one down near Limpston where we allowed that. And it's not going to result in any more buildings than would be there anyway. So I'm very happy to second approval.
Thank you very much, Councillor Davey. And next I have Councillor Skinner to speak, please.
It's interesting in Ed's sum up there, the weight behind there is no objection from the parish council and actually people who've written into support. He puts the weight behind that. That was good. We had that on the last application, but never mind, it didn't hold there quite so well. So whether the cap fits or not, that's how we are, isn't it? Listen, this application, and I take the point what Councillor Davey has just said in that we don't normally support these applications where we are. This is a dwelling in the countryside. I'm going to be supporting it along with the recommendation that's gone forward. Make no mistake about that, because I think it brings many, many benefits. But we need to be mindful about what it is that we are doing. I do understand there's an existing barn there for the which had an approval, and this one is making an improvement. I don't see a problem in that per se. But I'm just conscious of looking into this, thinking about this, not looking into it. Sorry, that's the wrong terminology. Thinking about this a little bit more. This could go. It is a departure from policy, so I can only imagine that, Mr. Freeman, that how are you going to come out with your departure of policy within the written word that you're putting here under the approval? How are you going to come out with a departure policy to make this work? I'm interested to know that.
Mr. Freeman.
Well, fundamentally, we have to treat it as a departure from the local plan, but as has been said, the fallback position means the end result is the same. So fundamentally, I would suggest that is the other material consideration that justifies the departure from policy in this case.
So was it a departure from policy for the first time round? I didn't understand that it was. So when this application went through first time, was it a departure of policy or was it a barn conversion?
It was originally a conversion to a holiday let, in accordance with policy.
Mm-hmm.
And then subsequently, I believe as a result of an appeal decision on possibly not on this barn, I can't remember, but there was an appeal decision that established the principle of the loss of those holiday units to residential accommodation, which has then allowed it to be a residential conversion. And now they're looking to rebuild it as a residential dwelling. So one way or another, they have a fallback position for residential dwelling of the form and design proposed here. So the fallback position carries significant weight to justify a departure from policy.
Okay, I'm happy with that, Ed. I'm just trying to get my head around how these things change and vary, because we'll have another application will come up a bit later on. I try to remember as much as I can about what's gone on in the past. And I believe every day's a school day. We're always learning something. And I remember this day and how this one is panning itself out. Now it's got support from the officers. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Skinner. Next we go on to now, please.
Yeah, mine's quite simple. Yes, I'll be supporting the officers on their approval because they're dead right in their report. But I do wish to point out this is not a green conversion, although the end result is definitely an improved building. It is not environmentally friendly to demolish and rebuild. So it's not a green credentials, but for the future residents, it is far better. I hope that makes sense, but I will be supporting the officers. Thank you.
It does make sense indeed, Councillor Howe. Thank you very much. Next, Councillor Brown, please.
Thank you. Yeah. Application over at Cross Hills Farm in Weston got permission for 5 barns under a section Q. They came back and they was given planning permission to knock the barns down and build 5 new houses there. So I can't see anything wrong with one being done at all.
Thank you very much, Councillor Brown. I don't have any more speakers. We have a proposal from Councillor De Sarum and seconded by Councillor Davey for approval. So I will now go over to Mrs. Shaw to sum up, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, members, you have the recommendation as set out with the Chair. When your name is called, please would you indicate whether you support the motion to recommend approval, whether you're against the motion to recommend approval, or whether you're abstaining from the vote.
Councillor Brown.
Yeah, support the recommendation for approval.
Councillor Chamberlain.
Support. Thank you, Andy.
Councillor Davey.
Support approval.
Councillor De Sarum.
Support approval.
Councillor Key.
Approval.
Oh, no. Oh, sorry. Councillor Howe missed you out. Sorry.
That's all right. Support.
Thank you. Councillor Key was support. Councillor Lawrence.
Support approval.
Thank you. Councillor Pratt.
Support approval.
And Councillor Skinner.
Support approval.
Thank you. That was unanimous in support, so that's recommended for approval.
Lovely. Thank you, Wendy. Moving on to agenda item 12, application 221547, full application, Turbury Farm, stamps, coaches, Dunkeswell, pages 87 to 93. We just have the committee ward member, Councillor Brown and Councillor Key, to speak. But first of all, we will go over to Ed to present his report, please.
Thank you, Chair. As you say, this application relates to Turbury Farm and stamps coaches and an application for a static home to provide managers accommodation at the site. Please ignore that red line on the screen. The site is effectively this land here, which forms part of the wider site, which actually you'll see better on this plan here, which I think was originally part of the farm complex, but since been used for the storage of coaches in association with the business. Proposal is for this home to go on the area outlined in red. If we go to the plans, you can see that there's the existing coach park here. There's an existing dwelling in this location, a few outbuildings, but largely the area is used for coach parking with an access here off the main road. And the proposal is to put this probably best described as a modular dwelling. It doesn't fall within the definition of a caravan, but I think it is referred to in various places as a caravan within this area with its associated garden and car parking spaces. Move through, you can see that it's a 3-bedroom property, essentially the kind of mobile home that would arrive in 2 parts and be joined together on the site, as I understand it. So this is the road in front of the site. You can see the site on the right-hand side, and this is the site with the coaches stored within. and you can see there is some reasonable screening in places along the boundary with mature trees, but quite significant gaps in between. But I think in the context of the site, the static home would not be visually obtrusive or harmful, despite the fact it's obviously located in the countryside and within the AONB. I think the key issue here is that this is a new dwelling in the countryside, fundamentally, and we consider this to be a remote location that's unsustainable. Fundamentally, it's outside of any built-up area boundary. Indeed, Dunkeswell and the Highfield estate that it's closest to do not at the present have a built-up area boundary either, so it is actually quite a significant distance from the nearest built-up area boundary. I think the applicants are promoting this on the basis that this is a home to support a rural enterprise. But as members heard earlier, our policy in terms of rural workers' dwellings specifically requires a proven functional need and evidence that the business is financially viable. I think the functional need is the issue in this case. Or would be if it were generally a rural workers' home, but the policy clearly says that rural workers are those people whose place of work is located in and related to the countryside, typically comprising farm workers, forestry workers, and others involved in rural-based enterprise. So while this may well be a business located in a rural location, it is not one that requires to be located in the rural area and is related to the countryside or countryside activities, and so I don't think it complies in terms of our rural workers policy. Even if it did, I would question whether or not there is a functional need in this case. The need that's highlighted is one in terms of security. But as mentioned at an earlier item, we wouldn't usually accept security as a functional need, given that technologies such as lighting and security cameras would usually suffice, particularly in a case like this where there's no animal welfare issues at stake. I would also point out that there is already a dwelling on this site. My understanding is that the current operators of the business live in that dwelling and are looking to basically reduce their involvement in the business and let their daughter take on a larger role. However, she lives elsewhere and currently has to commute to the site. And so the home is proposed to reduce commuting distances and obviously provide additional security. So we don't feel that it qualifies under our rural enterprise policy as a rural enterprise, and even if it did, we don't believe that there would be a functional need. So we are assessing this simply as a dwelling in the countryside, remote from services and facilities, that is unsustainable and not acceptable under the council's policies in the local plan. I would just quickly highlight, I believe the applicant's agent was too late to register to speak on this item, but they have provided me with some bullet points that they wanted me to highlight to you, so I will just quickly highlight those. They want to highlight that this is a static home and not a caravan. They say it is a private dwelling outside of a built-up area boundary, but in their view, this is a rural enterprise. And they say if the business is to continue to function, it requires this dwelling. If the business did not benefit from this, it increases traffic and massively increases overheads for the enterprise. They cite the commuting for the family to get to work, apparently sometimes 3 or 4 times a day, and the need to increase security. They say it will help to maintain the employment of over 40 members of staff and highlight the benefits of the business in terms of the local economy, and list well over £200,000 worth of expenditure to local businesses in relation to local garages, parts, services, etc., in terms of servicing the coaches and operating the business. As I say, we hear what their views on those issues. However, and as with an earlier application, I can see that it certainly would reduce commuting, but there are all sorts of other day-to-day activities and journeys that need to be made that potentially locating a dwelling in this location would increase in terms of those activities. And so I don't think it follows that this is more sustainable than the alternative. So the recommendation remains one of refusal on the basis that this is a new dwelling in the open countryside outside of built-up area boundaries with no justification in terms of a rural business or otherwise, or an essential need for rural business, located in an unsustainable location, and therefore is recommended for refusal. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Ed. So I'd like to move on now to the committee ward members. First of all, I have Councillor Brown to speak, please.
Thank you. Yeah, this is a live-work unit. And if members of the committee can cast their mind back, if they're capable, to February 2022, there was a planned application coming for 5 live-work units on the site next door, which was written up for approval, even though it's outside the built-up area boundary. And it's only 100 yards away from this particular application. Also, further along on the site, there was an application for the conversion of an agricultural building to live work in July 2020, and that involved new doors, windows, exterior cladding, car lorry parking, and improved access, of which was written up for approval. This application is for a manager to have accommodation with a static home, and this would make it a live work unit as approved before. Live work units are supported by the neighbourhood plan. Appropriate conditions could restrict this, so it could only be lived in by the manager or an employee of Stamps Coaches. Therefore, I recommend it for approval.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. Is that a proposal?
Yes, it is.
Thank you very much, Councillor Brown. Do we have a seconder?
Yes, Councillor Key.
Councillor Key, lovely. You're down to speak next, so we'll move over to you now.
Right, okay, fine, thank you very much. As you will see on the plan, right, it just baffles me when it says in open countryside. You've got Turbury Farm on the front page, page 87, you've got Turbury Farm there. Right next to it, backing onto it, is South Hayes Farm. Now, that is in actual fact a yard that has no, South Hayes Farm has no land with it. It is just a yard with massive buildings there and a bungalow. Now, this site where the coaches are is wanted for the daughter to actually helped. Well, she runs the business now and lives in Payhenbury and has to travel. She has to travel up there in the morning. She then has to go back to pick up the children, whereas the children could be picked up right outside of the gate here and go to Broadhenbury School. With regard to the modes of transport there, it says there are no nearby services which can be accessed. Within 100 yards, there is a bus service from Honiton to Taunton. So I don't know quite where the planning officer got his information from. Nowhere, I think, because it's not correct. And with regard to unsustainable area, I mean, you've got Dunkeswell, which is a kilometre away and within easy walking distance, although you've got verges there that they can walk on and quite easily walk there, and they do that anyway. And that's the facilities there. I mean, you've got a post office, you've got a shop, you've got a restaurant, you've got sports facilities, play areas. So, I mean, there's absolutely nothing else, and a big sports hall as well, nothing else that would be wanted. So I really object to it being called an unsustainable area. The actual need for this is to avoid travelling, which is what we're trying to do. We're trying to cut down on emissions and such like. And this is why, I mean, the daughter wants to live on the premises because she has to travel there 3 or 4 times a day. Now, you did hear in actual fact that the business, I mean, it is a big business because they employ 46 people there, part-time as well as full-time, and they do 30 bus trips for school children every day. So it's not just a fly-by-night business, it is a big business, as well as doing sort of private traveling as well. And therefore, I mean, this is, as Councillor Brown said, a live-work unit, because we were absolutely astounded because we were against the live-work units that were about 200 yards away, the agricultural building that was actually put up for 5 live-work units and was approved. Now, I mean, it's utterly ridiculous, that is, because that has improved or increased the traffic by a considerable amount. This won't increase the traffic by anything whatsoever because they will be living on site. So I fully support the recommendation of approval of this application. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Key. I don't know, Ed, did you want to come back on anything there, or do you want to wait until a bit later?
Happy to wait until a bit later, Chair, and see whatever comments are made. Thank you.
That's fine, thank you. So next I have to speak, Councillor Skinner, please.
Thank you very much. And Ed made a point that, of course, we had an application about a mobile home at that time. And this is a static home, it is different. But we're in a different place here. And I'm actually feeling I'm going to be supporting. I'm glad the ward members have stood up to this, and I'm going to be supporting the ward members of this. We need to wake up in this authority and smell the coffee. There are businesses out there that need some help. We're not asking that we're going to build them a home. We're not going to put our money in our pockets. We're going to give them the ability to improve their business. The rural location scenario that's set out, I get that from a degree. There's nobody knows this area better than the ward members. Both the ward members have cited other sites around that we've made these improvements to in having work-live units. This coach business is really very important to the school network of transport travel. Now, we could argue the case and say, and I'm sure one of the officers, Mr. Freeman, could say, this is not going to change whether or not the business, this is not about whether the business is going to be in business or not be in business. This is really about whether or not we can have a location here for a static home. We're in a crisis, a housing crisis at the minute, whereby we haven't got enough homes. And incrementally and drip by drip, some applications come forward that tick the box of what we should be trying to improve. I hear time and time again at this authority about how we need to help rural business, about how we need to help this, how we need to help that, and how we need to help the other. And when it really comes down to it, when we get an application like this, which is really important to these particular people, there's going to be some sort of policy that says, we can't do that. Well, come on. Let's wake up to the facts and have a little bit of human dignity about all of this. We, as members of this authority, have a duty to try to improve and help people in their lives as they go forward. And there is a way through this, and I know exactly what's going to happen here. We're going to go along with saying that we want to support this, go against the officer's recommendation. Mr. Freeman's going to come in all the reasons why we shouldn't do that, which he's laid out, which he'll try and back up even to a bigger degree. And we are going to have to come up with some reasons why we're going to make a departure from our normal policy, from a building into the countryside with a static home, and saying that this application is going to be improved. So I'm going to give it to you now. It's quite simple. This particular application is going to be supported because where the officers have said they don't consider it to be a rural-based business is fundamentally wrong. It is a rural-based enterprise business. So we do have the ability through our policy to support this application through that process. So one of two things can happen. We can either support this application and ask the officers to write this up in a way that it will be approved on the rural-based enterprise process. And I know what Mr. Freeman will do now. He'll want to guide all the criteria around what that is and say that it doesn't fit. Well, let's make it fit. Let's make it fit. Because it really upsets me when I know how hard it is to be in business. I know how hard it is to keep things going. I know how hard it is to the transition from somebody who wants to step back and let his daughter come in, when all they want to do is to improve their lives, improve the lives of their children. And as far as sustainability is concerned, I've never heard so much more nonsense in all my life talking about sustainability in this particular application than what I've heard here today. This means that the sustainability issue is absolutely wiped out. Not only is it wiped out, it's improved dramatically through the livelihoods of these people living the life in which they live, nearer to the school, won't have to keep making trips to pick the children up, won't have to keep nipping home for this, that, and the other because they're living in Pembroke, and this is much further away. The sustainability with this is an absolute nonsense. And they're going to make a trip to the shop. I bet they live in Pembroke and drive to Honiton, to Tesco's, or drive to Octree St. Mary to go to Sainsbury's, make trips anyway. So no, I'm absolutely against this recommendation. I think it's poor form, actually. It's poor form of our officers to come up with this and not work harder to try and make something like this really happen if we really want to make changes. So no, I'm going to support those two members. I absolutely support them. And I put behind weight of what I can see why we should be approving this application. And I hope you as members will back up the two ward members, the parish council as well that have backed it, and get in and support this application, because this is the things we should be doing to make this country better. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Skinner. I will just note at this point that, you know, officers are working to policies that have been set in the local plans that have been put together by us as a committee a long time ago. And we are doing a new plan going forward. They are doing their job, as in looking at applications coming in and looking at the policies that we set and we have as an authority. There are going to be circumstances, maybe like this one and others that do come forward, whereby, and the circumstances that we live in at that time when it comes forward, that we might need to be looking slightly outside the box. I would just be very mindful that officers have been working hard to keep these applications, which they deal with a lot coming in, and keeping them in line with the policies that we set together with the officers going forward. So in instances like this, and I know some people are very passionate about the things that come forward, I would like to just see that we can work together with each other and maybe put those suggestions forward in a calm and professional manner for the next local plan when it's coming forward. And maybe these are things that need raising strategically going forward for the new plan that is coming in. Can we just be mindful of that going forward? I know it's hard, and I know the circumstances that we are under, all of us at the moment, are quite harsh. But I would hate to think that we come on here at all and attack anybody for doing their job in the wrong way. Next, I'll move on to Councillor Mike Howe, please.
Sorry to interrupt. Can I just say something in response? You know, live work units, which are classed as, are supported in the neighbourhood plan, and I think the neighbourhood plan takes preference over the local plan. You know, correct me if I'm wrong, but that's my understanding.
Absolutely, Councillor Brown, and that might well be the case. It's the manner in which we talk to each other that I was trying to highlight more than anything else.
Thank you.
Now I'd like to move on to Councillor Howe. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. And first off, thank you for what you've said. I think you're spot on. What I will point out is we do not make policy on this committee. The Strategic Planning Committee does. That is the policy making formation for planning. We are the deciding committee on that policy. But my question is, and I wanted Mr. Freeman to answer, because everyone has gone out about these live work units that are just down the road. So before I make any further comments, I would like to know the circumstances around that and Mr. Freeman's feelings on those live work units and what policy they were allowed under, etc., please, if he could.
Ed, if you're happy to come in.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I mean, I don't know the specifics of every application, but my understanding is the only live work units that have been allowed in that location are part of the industrial estates, the airfield and what's it called, airway industrial estate, and flightway industrial estate. I think that's what I'm thinking of, which are a part of the former airfield and were founded, as I believe, largely through conversion of existing airfield buildings and are subsequently expanded since then. So in that context of an existing industrial estate, live work units would be acceptable. I think the circumstances of this case are markedly different from that. There's no, this is, yes, an existing business, but it already has a dwelling on the site. I don't understand the need for an additional dwelling. And certainly, even if you did want it to class it as a live work unit, you wouldn't allow 2 dwellings for a work unit. So I don't see the relevance of that to this in this case, but I'm sure we haven't granted any new build live work units in the countryside in this location.
Sorry, can I just correct Mr. Freeman? If he wants to look up application 21/1497, and there's also another application whose number I haven't got in front of me, but I can get it for him. And if he looks at that application in particular, he can see that is on the corner, no more than probably 100 yards, if less than that, from this particular site. So it's one that you approved, and you approved it because it was in the neighbourhood plan. Thank you.
Sorry, can I ask what number it was again?
That was 21/1497.
Okay, while you have a look at that, Councillor Howe, and that, we'll move on to Councillor Davey, please.
Thank you, Chair. I was going to say Councillor Skinner sounded so passionate, I was going to suggest he went into politics, and then I realised he was. But despite that, there are a few factually inaccurate things being said here. This is not a rural business. I'm looking at policy H4 at the moment and the preamble to it, and this enterprise is in the countryside, but it doesn't need to be. It could as easily be situated in a town or on an industrial estate. It is situated in the countryside, but that doesn't make it a rural enterprise in terms of the definition offered. I would say, actually, when we come to revise the local plan, we might want to tighten up that definition of rural enterprises, because looking at it, it does seem a little bit loose and a matter of interpretation. Now, I'm normally very uncomfortable about development in the countryside for the usual reasons, and that's supported by the NPPF. Here, I think it is quite balanced, and if I was simply thinking in terms of car journeys, I can see that a short car journey to take a child to school down to Broadhembury is probably less than the number of journeys that the applicant would make getting to and from the site on a daily basis. I'm not sure if that's a material consideration, so I'm a bit conflicted at the moment. Councillor Brown also stated that the neighbourhood plan overrules the local plan, and that is not actually the case. The neighbourhood plan sits underneath the local plan, and they are required to be in harmony. I think references to previous applications, we know, we've been on this committee long enough to know that reference to preceding applications is not really relevant. We are looking at each application on its own, and not you can always cite other applications that have been approved or refused, and you will find there are slight material considerations in each one that mean that the committee came to the decision that it did, or the officers made the recommendation that they did. So I'm going to listen to a couple more people, because I am a little bit conflicted on this one, and I'm not sure whether the sort of number of car journeys it would generate is necessarily a strong enough material condition.
Thank you very much, Councillor Davey. We'll move on now to Councillor Key, please.
Can I just clarify? The actual school bus that would take them to Broadhenbury goes right past the entrance there. Now, the reason why they've actually gone for this building is because he said, if the worst comes to the worst, he said, we can actually have a mobile home in the garden. So, but he said, we would like something that is actually, looking nice. Now, it has been referred to in other things. I mean, Mr. Freeman mentioned the one that we were fined and lost costs. That was retrospective there. That wasn't applied for. This is something that is legally being applied for and in a good cause. And this is why, as I say, the number that Councillor Brown actually referred to was about within 200 yards. The others, if you look at the plan, it's the left-hand side of South Hayes Farm there, nowhere near the actual aerodrome where all the other live work units have been. So, I mean, people, when they're doing these applications, surely, or looking at them, have to have the visual area as to where these are. I mean, this, if you actually go to the aerodrome, it's probably 1.5 miles, could be 2 miles from where this property is. So with reference to the live work units on the aerodrome, has nothing to do with this at all. As I say, the live work units that were granted, and it was an agricultural building, which if it hadn't been a farm at the time, would never have been allocated. And then it was then passed by the committee, and I know Councillor Brown and I were against it, and it was passed for 5 live work units. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Key. We'll move now to Councillor Howe, please.
Yes, I wanted the research to know what's going on, and in fact, you can't compare the other relevant cases that are being named to this. This is totally separate again. As Councillor Key has just pointed out, the other one was on a farm. It was a barn. It was allowed to be demolished and rebuilt as we live work units, yes, but it is totally separate case with different policies. And that is the problem. And Mr. Freeman has pointed out the other live work units are again part of an industrial site. As much as I have sympathy for this, and I in so many ways would like to support this application, we haven't got the policies to do so. It's as simple as that. And we cannot manufacture policies just for our taking, because those policies, and watch Mr. Freeman go blue as or red, I don't know which way it's going to be as I say this, because although you can't set, God, I'm trying to think of the words. Although you can't set precedents in planning, the reality is that is the sign you are sending. If you put a new house, which is what this effectively is, in the open countryside without good grounds and good plans to allow it behind, then God help us everywhere else, because you'll have, I've got a coach park just up the road here. Guess what? They'll be come up for one, and everywhere else. Coaches is not a rural business. It's in the rural business. It's in the rural countryside, but it's not a rural business in itself. And supporting this in its current form, and Councillor Skinner's speech would be lovely at strategic planning. I would support him there to get a policy done for it. But we haven't got those policies at present. We're working under our current policy guidelines. And unfortunately, and regretfully to a certain extent, but the reality is I have to support the officers on this. They have written this up correctly. And as such, it has to be turned down. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Howe. Next, I move on to Councillor Lawrence, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'm really confused with this. We had an application earlier where a man wanted to live in a rural location and run his business. Was that not a live-work unit? But we turned it down, and now we're being asked to approve another one. I will approve it, but I do understand what you were saying earlier, Chair, that the officers have strict rules to work by, and we can't just keep chopping and changing as we see fit. And perhaps it is something that should be looked at strategically and looked at in the new local plan. I mean, I am all in favour of developing businesses in the countryside and making the best of those that are already there. But I am a bit confused about this live-work idea. But that's just a comment. But I should be voting in favour. I should be following the two ward members. But it does seem to be a bit contradictory. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Lawrence. I'm moving on now to Councillor Pratt, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'm looking at the local plan at the moment, and rural workers are those people whose place of work is located in and related to the countryside, typically comprising farm workers, forestry workers, and others involved in rural-based enterprise. And rural-based enterprise doesn't mean to be you're selling chickens or whatever, but I think that definition of rural-based enterprise, you have a choice of interpretation there. And having a business which runs coaches in a rural area, that could be covered in H4, policy H4. It's a matter of interpretation, a bit like the courts. So I think you could go both ways on this, but you've got a choice. It's a question of interpretation of those words. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next, we move over to Councillor Key, please.
Thank you, Chair, for allowing me to come back again. It really sort of baffles me. I mean, here we've already gone against two applications that were put up for refusal and approved, right? Councillor Howe is saying, yes, we have to stick by policies. If we're going to stick by policies, why are we bothering to have a planning committee? Just leave it to the officers then. Surely, I've always been taught, and I've been on the committee now for 23 years, and we were always taught that the officers are there to guide us. The actual committee is there to make the final decision. This takes into account whether you break the policies or not, as long as the recommendation gives the correct comments as to why it's being overturned, and that would be it. But as with regard to the sort of as having the recommendations for the policies, then why bother to have a committee? Thank you.
Can I come back, Chair?
Yes, you can.
Thank you. Councillor Key knows as well as I do that this committee is there to weigh policies against each other. We are not here to invent new policies. That is strategic planning. If any of these councillors come up with policy reasons, as Councillor Pratt has tried to hint at, for overturning the officers, great. But just throwing policies out without the correct policies given weight is what we're here for. So we balance policies out, we interpret policies, but we can't create new policies. And I look forward to officers or legal telling me otherwise. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Howe. Councillor De Sarum.
Thank you very much, Chair. It is very much the issue, very much a strategic planning issue, as other members have stated. And I looked at page 91 of our reports pack, which clearly indicated that this didn't meet policy H4, it didn't meet policy LE1, and basically it's contrary to strategy 5B and policy TC2 of the local plan. So there's lots of reasons on page 91 why it couldn't be supported. But then I also read on page 90, this strategy states only development which accords with a specific local or neighbourhood plan policy shall be permitted. So I wanted to ask the question of Mr. Freeman and possibly the ward members, have they got the appropriate neighbourhood plan policy, which will actually allow us to not rewrite policy or make new policy, but find reasons why we can support it based on what the neighbourhood plan said. So I think that for me, it's what does the neighbourhood plan say? Because I've just read out the list of all other policies where it clearly didn't meet the criteria. So if we could perhaps sort that one out, that might be very helpful, Chair, which I hope it will help. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor De Sarum. I don't know, Ed, do we have the neighbourhood policy at all to hand, or shall I come back in a minute?
Thank you, Chair. I'm just looking at the neighbourhood plan policy now. So might need to come back to me on that in a moment. But in terms of policy H4, I think the key wording is where it refers to the description of rural workers. It says rural workers are those people whose place of work is located in and related to the countryside. I don't see how a coach business is related to the countryside. It may be located in the countryside, certainly doesn't need to be in the countryside, and I think that's the key. I would also point out that the rest of the text of that policy, which does go on for another page and a half, only really refers to agricultural workers, forestry, and other, rural enterprises. So I can't see any policy support under H4 for this application. Apologies for not being aware of the application that the ward members were referring to, but I do agree with Councillor Howe, having looked at it, that it is a very different proposal that was replacing an existing agricultural building, which could probably have been converted to dwellings under Part Q anyway. So I think that was very different circumstances. If you can bear with me, I will look at the neighbourhood plan policy and come back to you in a moment, if I may, Chair.
Of course, that's brilliant. Thank you very much, Ed. So we'll go on to Councillor Davey next, please.
Thanks for allowing me to come back, Chair. I just want to say that even if this was a farm, we have turned down, with good justification, applications for extra buildings on farms as well, often citing very similar reasons, family circumstances, security, and so on. And those are not policy compliant either. So I think before we get too sidetracked on whether it is or isn't a rural business, we need to consider that even if it were a rural business, we would then be looking at different policies, or possibly some of the same policies, and it probably still wouldn't fit the definition. So I'm still going to support refusal.
Thank you, Councillor Davey. Councillor Skinner, please.
I'll try to temper my emotion. I'm not actually trying to be, I think when you made your comments, I didn't come back at the time. I'm not trying to be critical of officers. What I'm trying to do is for officers to try to be more pragmatic in their view. And there is a path. planning has always sat itself in the grey. It doesn't sit itself in the black and white, hence the reason why we're here. The comments that Councillor Key made was that if we were absolutely going to follow policy to the nth degree, then what would be the point of us being here at all? And the reason for that is, and Councillor Pratt made a very good point, it is open to interpretation of that grey area of which we sit. I don't agree with Councillor Howe and trying to drive down what is the policies that are in place as if they're all written in stone and there's no movement at all. It's not a viewpoint that I take on this committee. I do agree with him as far as you can't make policies up. Of course we can. Nobody's sat here looking to make policies up. But you've also got to look at the viewpoint, and the viewpoint I'm trying to get across is pulling into this some common sense approach into what is trying to be achieved here. And if you want to look at when Mr. Freeman says policy H4, we can't actually, it doesn't fit within the countryside because it doesn't have to be there. We could say that about a myriad of things. The fact of the matter is, it is there. And there is an application here today. I can't go on the back of what could be, maybe, or might be, or should be. We're going on what is today. This business is a rural business from the very fact it's a business in a rural area. That's been defined. Therefore, it fits within that criteria. You can't jiggle it around and say you could move this business down to somewhere else. The fact is, they're not moving to somewhere else. They are where they are. So the fact is, it's a rural business. As far as Councillor Davies suggesting and saying, if it was viewed in that point, perhaps it would be viewed in a different way through different policies. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. But then perhaps if the officers had done the work on that and done that, we may be in a position whereby, and this is one of the things I want to look to changing, if ever we get into a position of power again, is we need to be changing the way that officers, it used to be, and Councillor Key will remember this, officers used to come to the planning committee with a reason why, whatever the outcome is with the policies that it is, reasons why you couldn't do something of a refusal. They would then go on to say, and you remember this, Councillor Key and any others here long enough, when Mr. Pode was here and the rest of it, he said, but if you were mindful to want to go against the officer's recommendation and wanted to approve this application, we are setting out the parameters of which that may or may not possibly work. That was a way forward that gave us choices. This way that we go on at the moment is almost, here's the policy, and Councillor Howe sticks to it like glue to a gun. Here's the policy, and we can't move outside of it. I agree, lots of things what Councillor Howe said. This is not the place to be making things up. I agree with that. But we are also in a place that, as I've said before, we sit in the grey and we sit in a place of interpretation of planning law. It is planning law. And in this particular case, this business is in the rural area, and therefore it is a rural business. No matter how you want to carve it up, the interpretation of somebody else's view, whether it's Mr. Freeman's or somebody else's, is inaccurate. The fact of the matter is, it's a rural business in a rural area. You can carve it up how you like. That's the fact. And if you go into a court of law about this, that's how it would be portrayed. So in other words, we sit within the grey. I am still not being convinced by what has been said by other members in sitting wholly with the policy. I like what Councillor Pratt has said and his views and where he is. I am convinced that the outcome of what we're trying to achieve here today is for the greater good. And I believe we're doing the right thing. If I didn't think we were doing the right thing, I wouldn't be for it. Not people here, they're the chances. And I think we have policy around that, working within that we can make this happen. And that strengthens our case. It doesn't open up the doors to all things coming forward, as Councillor Howe suggested. No, it doesn't, because we have sound planning reasons as to why we're approving this application in no different way than any other application comes forward. So it's really interesting to have this debate, and I'm really interested that members are voicing their views one way or another. But that's my view, that's where I am, and I think at the end of the day, we come out with something good, and that's where I want to be. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Skinner. Now moving to Councillor Key, please.
Yes, just to clarify, Chairman, in actual fact, this business several years ago, right, was in the centre of Payhembry, and there was so many complaints about the vehicles being in there. This is why it moved to the site it is, because it wasn't in a village. I mean, there's no way that they could go in onto an industrial estate because there's no area big enough in Honiton to do it. And I mean, there's no space big enough at Dunkeswell to do it either. So this is why they have actually gone to this site to come out of a built up area so that it doesn't annoy people.
Thank you, Councillor Key. Ed, can we come back to you with just reference to the neighbourhood plan, please, if you've managed to find something?
Yes, thank you, Chair. So I've been looking at policy LE1 in the Dunkeswell neighbourhood plan, which does relate to live-work spaces. It seems to primarily relate to live-work units at the existing industrial estate, but it doesn't preclude them from being elsewhere. It simply says preferably located on the existing industrial estate. So if you took the view that this was a live-work unit, there you could find some support from policy LE1, but I can't see anything in policy LE1 that supports having more than one dwelling at a live-work unit, and we are talking about a second dwelling. Here there is already a dwelling at the site, which I would have thought would fulfill that function and make it a live-work unit if you wish to take that interpretation. I can't see any support for a second dwelling at a live-work unit under policy LE1. The other thing I'd just quickly say in terms of interpretation of policy H4, and part of the reason I would seriously urge care being taken in terms of interpretation of a rural enterprise, is that obviously we have a huge number of businesses located in rural locations that are not involved in agriculture or forestry. So if you start to take that interpretation, it's a slippery slope before we end up with dwellings at a lot of businesses that, to my mind, simply wouldn't be rural enterprises under that policy and wouldn't have any kind of functional need for a dwelling. And as Councillor Davey has said, even if you take this site as being under policy H4, I don't think they've demonstrated any functional need for a dwelling, certainly not a second dwelling. So I understand where members are coming from and member sympathy for this family and their business, but I can't find any policy support for granting consent in this case. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Ed. I have Councillor Brown to speak.
Right, yeah. In the local plan, paragraph 8.7 goes on to state that such development is not exclusive to the industrial estate, which means it can be built elsewhere. And that's the policy the previous application went through for live-work units went through on.
Thank you, Councillor.
I think, if I may, through you, Chair, just to clarify, I think Councillor Brown's referring to the neighbourhood plan, if I'm correct, in reference to paragraph 8.7.
Yeah, it's a neighbourhood plan I'm referring to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I would agree. As I said, I don't see that live-work units under policy LE1 have to exclusively be at the industrial estate. But as I say, I can't see any support in the policy LE1 for second dwelling as a live-work site. It doesn't address that eventuality.
But we put 5 live-work units on, so this would be 2. You're talking about we've approved 5 before. When we can put a restriction on this, that the unit is limited to people that are employed by the coach company.
Chair, could I suggest we go for a vote, because we're going to go round in circles. Councillor Brown makes a very good point, but Mr. Freeman, we're going to end up Mr. Freeman coming under attack in all sorts of ways and trying to defend that. If we go to a vote, then we'll know where we are. I think most points have been saliently made.
Thank you very much. Yes, so we have no more speakers that haven't spoken now. I would just caution with this, that's all I'm saying. We have on the table a proposal to approve this application. The proposer is Councillor Brown and Councillor Key has seconded. I will now go over to Shirley to sum up, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, members, we have a recommendation just to approve. If Councillor Brown and Councillor Key could put together their reasons for going against officer recommendation. And whilst they're thinking about that, could I please also ask them that there was mention by Councillor Brown just then to a limit to of occupation to those employed in the business, but you haven't delegated the power to officers. So I would recommend including delegation of conditions to officers in consultation with the chair, vice chair and ward members, and for the inclusion of an occupation limitation on employees, if that's agreeable.
Yeah, limited to employees, and it complies with policy LE1, paragraph 8.7 of the neighbourhood plan.
So could I have your reasons for going against officer recommendations, please?
Yeah, because it complies with policy. If we put the restriction on it that it can only be lived in by people employed within the business, it complies with policy LE1, paragraph 8.7 of the neighbourhood plan.
However, you're not giving me the reason in relation to the local plan that you are wanting to go, because as was articulated, the neighbourhood plan is precedent and the local plan has precedence and the neighbourhood plan is in accordance with the local plan. And I need local plan reference or a material consideration that means that you're going against the local plan policies.
Give me a couple of minutes and I'll try and find something.
Could I make a suggestion? Because I've actually made this suggestion, I think it's 3 times already, and whether Mr. Freeman likes it or not, it's been made 3 times. And that is regarding policy H4, where it goes on to say, and Councillor Pratt actually made a very good point. He's obviously looked it up and all the rest and see where it is, because it goes on to say that the business is a coach business. I mean, this is written by the officers, so they've written it, and how they want to write it. That's fine. I don't have a problem with that. Although the provision of coach facilities is beneficial for rural communities, it is a matter of fact, and I've made this point on 3 occasions. It is a matter of fact. This is it is in a rural area, and it is a rural business. So therefore, in my opinion, and whether members want to agree with it or not, and we'll see whether or not with the voting, that this is a business that would be a rural-based enterprise. If we worked it on the back of that as policy, working on the back of policy H4, and I know Mr. Freeman doesn't like it, but that's where we are. At the end of the day, if it fits within that criteria, then that's a sound reason as to why you would be tying this particular application and taking it this way and going forward. Now, what you want to make of that is what you want to make of it. I do feel that probably a comment from Mr. Freeman on the back of it. I know you're going to agree with it, but we need to make sure that is going to be sound, and whether or not that's something, Mr. Freeman, you feel that you and your officers, when you're going to do your conditioning or reasons as to why, that if that stacks up, is that something you can stack and get behind?
Can I make a suggestion going along from what Councillor Skinner said? It's taking children from, it's a rural enterprise, in effect, it takes children from rural areas to schools.
I think Ed might need to come back, but I need Councillor Brown and Councillor Key to articulate their reasons for putting the proposal rather than Councillor Skinner.
Ed, do you want to come back now before they?
One of the comments, in actual fact, made that there is no essential need demonstrated for this residential. There is an essential need, because it's an essential need for somebody to actually run the business.
Chair, could I ask a question of Mr. Skinner?
You can indeed, and then we are going to end it.
Because obviously what Mr. Skinner has said is that if you have a business in the open countryside, because that's what we're talking about, in the open countryside, you will be allowing an office, a farm, an engineer, a garage mechanic, a kitchen fitter, a builder, and everyone else to have a new house because they are a rural enterprise with a yard or whatever else, and as such, they should be granted housing accommodation. Is that what your intention is? Because I need to be clear about this.
Well, you know the answer to that, Councillor Howe.
I know, so please differentiate why this is a rural business and none of those others would be.
Because I think we have to take each application as they come forward on their own. We hear, how many times have we heard, Councillor Howe, especially from Councillor Eileen Ragg as the chairman, each application is determined on its own merit. Now, we are determining this application on the basis of it hasn't gone forward yet because it hasn't gone forward because the other members haven't done it. But let's just say it's going forward on the basis of partly the local neighbourhood plan, which will hold some weight, and on the basis of what I've suggested it being what Mr. Pratt Councillor Pratt suggested, which I think is mitigated in the fact that this is a business that is a rural enterprise business in the countryside. The answer to that question is, if other people put applications in for whatever reasons that is, those applications will be determined on that merit on the back of our policy that we got here. What you're trying to, I think, say, and correct me if I'm wrong, and I'm sorry, Chair, doing this, because this is almost like Councillor Howe and I having a debate, but it is a very important one, and I think members ought to hear it, because we ought to get it out and make sure we got it right. I think what you are saying, Councillor Howe, is, by the way that you've posed your question to me, is you're accepting the fact that all businesses then are going to come forward and want to have houses, and they want to use this as what you consider to be a loophole on the basis of trying to get housing in all of these sites, because that's the way you've garnered your question to me. Is that correct in what you're suggesting to me?
That is exactly the way I am garnishing that question to you. Exactly.
Right.
That reason.
Then the answer to that question is clear. The answer to that question is, as each application comes forward, they will be determined on their own merit. And I believe that the policies that we have in place would defend us against that. And if what you're trying to say is that they could cite this application as to why we've done it, we have two sound reasons as to why. One of the sound reasons as to why is you're seen as a loophole, as a way in. That's the way I'm seeing that you're interpreting this. What I'm saying is that this application is being determined on the basis that it quite clearly says for rural enterprise businesses. I consider it's a rural enterprise business. The fact that this application is coming forward now actually means, Councillor Howe, that actual fact other businesses could have already done this, but they've chosen not to. And that's because the circumstances around this is this gentleman lives on a site, and this is his daughter who's going to go on and run the business. That is quite different to what you're garnering. To me, as a question, is a generalisation. And that's not fair, actually, Councillor Howe, to be fair. It's not really fair, because we would want to see what an application comes forward was actually going to be in the definition of that application when it comes forward. This application is here in front of us today. What could be or maybe or should be is for another day, and it isn't here. And if it at such a point that we think we need to tighten this up, then I suggest we get back to our planning policy team and tighten it up if something's happening that we as members don't want to see happen. But there's a way there that this could happen, and I believe we're going to have a good outcome of this particular application. That's my view. That's where I am.
Okay, so you don't have a reason how to differentiate. But thank you.
Thank you.
That's what I said.
Thank you very much, everybody. I think this just brings one thing forward to me and makes it very clear that the perception of a rural business is very different between people, and that perception in the new policy that comes forward through strategic planning needs to be tightened up in some way. To me, my own personal opinion is my perception of a rural business is a business that cannot be constructed from the city. So as a farmer, I cannot run my sheep herd in the middle of a city. That is a rural business. As a bus driver, can I? Yes, you can run it from the various areas. To me, my own personal opinion, there are some rural businesses that need to stay rural. There are rural businesses that are there by the nature of where they are that don't need to be rural. So I'm going to take this forward now and we're going to go to the vote, but I need to go back to Shirley just to make sure she has all the correct bits she needs.
Thank you, Chair. Can I just verbalise what I have taken from debate is that the reasons for going against officer recommendation is that members considered this to be a rural business in a rural area and has a proven essential need. Is Ed happy that that is as he perceives members have articulated their reasons for going against officer recommendation?
I would agree that that is what members have articulated as their reasons, yes. I would just make one final point in terms of policy H4, which is that temporary dwellings, dwellings such as this should be on a 3-year temporary basis because it's not a permanent dwelling. So members may want to consider if they want to make, well, those putting forward the motion may wish to consider whether or not this should be on a temporary basis. But should also bear in mind that if you do so under that policy, it does permit a permanent dwelling in the future if there is a functional need.
Paul, I think we agreed earlier on that it would be tied to the business, that only someone could live there who worked for the business.
And that could be the case going forward, even if it was permanent, temporary or permanent, couldn't it?
Yeah.
So I think actually under H4 as the policy, it would be better to grant it under a temporary 3-year and then for them to apply for full with the business plan coming forward for full, then you'd be able to cover it much better in policy terms. Am I correct in that thinking, Ed?
Well, it would give a further opportunity to assess the functional need for the dwelling when if a permanent dwelling were to come forward in 3 years' time, yes. Or if a renewal of that temporary consent were to come forward in 3 years' time, you'd have another opportunity to consider the issue.
But that would mean that we would be using the correct policy then, isn't it, to take it forward, and it would give them the right to have their daughter on site for the 3 years and then give us more justification going forward. So I would like to propose that going forward because I think that is much more justified in what we're trying to do.
I'd be happy to propose that going forward if Councillor Brown is happy to accept it.
Yeah, I'm happy. Yeah, hang on. Yes, I'm happy to accept that.
Thank you, members. Therefore, we have a motion to approve for a temporary 3-year permission with the delegation of conditions to officers in consultation with the chair, vice chair and ward members. When your name is called, please would you indicate support of the motion to recommend approval, whether you're against the motion to recommend approval or whether you're abstaining from the vote. Thank you.
Councillor Brown.
Support the recommendation.
Councillor Chamberlain.
Abstain.
Councillor Davey.
Against.
Councillor De Sarum.
Support the approval for 3 years as specified.
Councillor Howe.
Against.
Councillor Key.
Support the proposal.
Councillor Lawrence.
Support the proposal.
Councillor Pratt.
Support the proposal.
Councillor Skinner.
Support the proposal.
Thank you. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 votes in support, 2 votes against, 1 abstention. So that is recommended for approval.
Lovely. Thank you very much, Wendy. We got there in the end. All right. So that brings our meeting to an end, and I would like to thank everyone, including members of the public, for their attendance. Members, can I remind you that until Democratic Services team confirm that the live streaming recording has stopped, you can still be seen and heard, and any comments made may be recorded. Thank you.
Councillor, Chairman,